What's up, everybody? Welcome to the lab with your host, Josh with Diaz, and tonight we are going to be doing Colin's show. Favorite member of the Witness Box, favorite doctor, and favorite author. Brucato, author of The New Evil, available in bookstores everywhere and on Amazon. Make sure to leave a review. Fascinating book. Huge. I hear you're handing out autographs. I'm going to need to get an autograph.
Well, I get a lot of requests for them, but usually I tell people to send I tell them to send a book plate, because this way I can sign the book plate and send it back, and they just stick it in the book. Like Barnes & Noble sells them, those self-adhesive little plates. Yeah, so I get a lot of requests for them.
Oh, very nice. Nobody has ever asked me for that.
Well, I think it's an author thing.
Actually, I think somebody has, and then I didn't take it serious, and I blew my chance at giving somebody an autograph, really. I think that's what happened. Anyway, how are you today?
Nothing much. I'm doing all right. The world is falling apart at the seams. Other than that, life's good.
Yeah, but how long has the world been falling apart at the seams? I mean, it seems like that. It seems to be quite often, right?
Well, it's been gradually falling apart at the seams, but I think those seams are ready to burst.
They're ready to go. No. I know, and you're in the heart of it, man. New York is the center of everything. The mayor is indicted, and I mean, there's just a lot of stuff going on in everywhere, really, honestly. I mean, and before we get started, I want to say that God bless everybody that has been affected by the hurricane. It's just been terrible. The videos and
I happen to love. I love studying meteorology. I'm very interested in it, and I find hurricanes to be fascinating. I mean, they're devastating, and my heart goes out to the people affected. But it's very interesting to study them and how they're getting bigger and stronger, and how they're now getting so large that their bands can reach onto land, and do a lot of damage without needing to be near the ocean where they're sucking the heat up. It's pretty remarkable stuff, to watch the weather changing, but it is changing.
Yeah, no, it seems, and they seem to, you're right. Somebody said just the other day that they said, people need to stop building their houses on the coast, but like, it's not even just affecting the coasts.
Why should they have to change where they live?
It's just not it's affecting everywhere. It just has nothing to do with just the coast.
I have a very hard time with people who sort of take a piss on nature. I think nature is a gift, and it's a very, very beautiful.
I would love to live on the coast.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I live near the coast, but I don't live on the coast. But we don't get too like flooding or anything. But yeah, it's just a terrible thing. So tonight we're gonna do a call and show. People ask. They're asking for more of these, and I appreciate that, and I enjoy doing them. We'll try and get through as many as we can. Like, we kind of suck at it personally, moving along, because I hate rushing people off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we're gonna be. I'm sure it won't work, so we'll just do it.
Well, I think it's because we, and I see this when we're with Chris too, is I think we're the kind of people who humanize everyone. So it's very hard for us to just see the person as, a caller. They become a person. We're interested in getting to know them a little bit and helping them with whatever it is that they're really, trying to work through, and why they're asking. I'm always interested in, why is the person asking me this question? Why is this fascinating them? And, I don't know. I think we have a tendency to get drawn into people. Freud thought that people become therapists and do these kinds of jobs, where you speak to people quickly and then they're gone.
Yeah.
A way of mastering loss.
That
it was a way of learning to be okay with letting people go because they won't be around long. And it's interesting when you think about it that way. I think that's true of a lot of people, surgeons, doctors,
Yeah, it does. I mean, yeah, I don't want to feel like I dismiss people, and like, oh yeah, well, you'll be fine, or I don't know. People call in, they have questions, they want to ask a question, and by the way, once again, no medical advice can be given, but if you want to talk about something that has happened to you, or a question about a true crime case,
Right.
in
No,
general.
we're not here to give psychotherapeutic advice, or we're here to, right, exactly, to talk
Well,
general.
legally you can't. I think legally I can.
Well, it's not legally. It's the idea that you want to be appropriate and boundaried because you don't want to establish a advice relationship with a person that isn't your patient, right? So we have to be appropriate. But people are very good about it. They usually just they call in with totally appropriate questions.
And the calling number is 817-799-8214. That's the number to call. We will get to as many as we can, and while we wait for uh those phones to start lighting up, and I think they always do, we'll try and get through as many as possible. But tell me a little bit, you're following along with this, I don't know if Menendez case, I mean, do you think that they're gonna get either retried or released? I mean, is that possible?
Well, let's put it this way, and this is um, a good place to kind of direct people to the new evil, right? The book I did with Michael Stone. So if you look at it, you see that Michael and I talk about separate categories for people who kill because they are traumatized. They're in a traumatizing situation where they act out in that way, right? Because they feel desperate, and people tend to almost have a sympathy for people like that. But obviously, it's not an excuse to kill. But they can understand that these are not people who are likely to keep doing it. It's a situational thing, and the public sometimes thinks those people are heroic for getting themselves out of a bad situation, right? Like the infamous case in Russia of the three daughters that were all being abused by their father. And so they couldn't take it anymore. They put a pillow over his head and took turns beating him with a hammer to kill him because of the incest. And in Russia, there was a demand for them to be released, right? So there's that kind. And then there's the kind of crime where you're knocking somebody out of the way, what I've called elimination murder, because you want their money, which is what the prosecution said was going on here, which made no sense because the Menendez brothers had access to that money. They didn't need to kill anyone to get that money. And now, these letters are emerging. So this writing has emerged that suggests that there really was abuse. So it's starting to look like one of those stories. And look, I mean, there are some states where there are laws that say that's a kind of mitigating factor, right? That a person acting out of abuse is very different than someone killing out of cold-bloodedness. So I think it may change some minds about it. I personally think part of the issue is that they're men. I think if they had been female perpetrators, if you look at the cases that tend to fall into that category of killing out of desperation or because of abuse, it does appear that there is a bias towards having more sympathy when the victim is female. We don't tend to think of males as victims of sexual trauma. But, there are stories about what might have been going on there, though, that were pretty bad. Ann Burgess and I are currently writing about similarities in the Menendez case and the Lizzie Borden case, both trials of the century. The Lizzie Borden case was 1893, the trial, and the Menendez case started exactly 100 years later in 1993. And both were trials of the century about someone or potentially a party killing parents. In the Borden case, a stepmother and a biological father, arguably for money, but possibly because of abuse. And so
Well, it's going to be fascinating, and
yeah, but yeah,
I
men
I
can be victims. We have to remember that. Yeah,
they certainly can, and I think that where they're gonna, I don't know if they'll fall short or not, but I think where kind of the divide is the premeditation, as you know, instead of like a crime of passion, like on, you know, like you see those shows Snapped and stuff like that.
Exactly.
So murder's wrong. We know that.
Of course.
But there are mitigating factors, as they call them. And I think that those things, those do deserve some special considerations. We got our first call here. Let's see. Let's open that everything works fine. Let's see here. Last time the whole board exploded. 447, you're on the air.
I'm listening. I've always wanted to say that. I'm sorry. I couldn't help it.
How did it feel?
In me.
Go ahead.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
I like
how ebullient you are. Does it? Yeah. Who is this?
The question I have for you is, I find couples that kill together extraordinary. I can never understand how you can get a man, a woman, or like the Menendez. The Menendez is separate, but for instance, not very far from me is Ian Brady, Myra Hindley, and that case cuts me through because there's still a child buried on those moors 55 years after they committed the murders. Right. And the family is still looking for the child. I find that case fascinating, how you can get a man and a woman to act together. Are they the same mindset? How do they find one another? Same with Fred and Rose West, Paul Bernardo. And yet, why do they go to the grave not saying why would they not say where the children are, if you understand what I mean? Why do they take it to the grave? Is that like a power thing? So that's basically it, the question.
It's a great question. By the way, where are you from exactly?
Ireland.
No, but which region?
Yeah.
I thought you were
Manchester.
I was going to say, you have a Mancunian, a fascinating Mancunian accent. I love listening to it. Speaking of Frasier, were the Mancunians driven crazy by Jane Leave's bad Mancunian accent on Frasier?
Yeah.
Did they dislike her attempt at Mancunian? Yes. But it's a beautiful accent. I love that accent.
Thank you.
No, it's a great accent. It's really colorful. So to answer your question, it's a little complicated because you cannot paint with a broad brush couples. Now, you're talking about romantic couples, not people with a friend or a partner or a confederate. You mean a romantic couple. You can't paint them over the broad brush because some of them involve people where the woman, it's usually the male is the central figure in the criminality, and the woman involved. This is just statistically, the woman involved is the partner to that chief, offender, and in some cases it has to do with the woman being traumatized or afraid. So, for example, if you look at the Cameron Hooker case, Janice, who was sort of participating, ultimately turned on him and right, but she wasn't herself really like a psychopath, right? Whereas Cameron Hooker was called a very dangerous psychopath. The women that you named, in the couples that you named, this is an unusual situation where the males were clearly all psychopaths. Fred West, Ian Henley, etc. These were all psychopaths. But their partners were too. Right, that's what made the cases you studied particularly interesting. And what went on there was that you had men who knew how to go out and find someone who shared their perversion. For example, Paul Bernardo has talked eloquently about how he would go to a bar and he would purposely make jokes that were inappropriate to watch the reaction of the women. And when he saw that Carla Homolka was not affected by the jokes that he would make, he would push a little bit more and a little bit more. And before you know it, they were drugging and assaulting her own sister. So that's the idea, that the ones you mentioned, they're couples that are involved in a kind of sadistic bond. And what happens is there's an intimacy that forms because it's like a dirty secret. You tell on me, I tell on you. It's kind of the intimacy that you'd see in a sadomasochistic bond, but where there's two people with a shared kind of paraphilic interest, but they're interested in the suffering of other people. In the Henley case, the Ian Henley case, which is truly horrifying, and I do recommend the book The Gates of Janus if you want to read his autobiographical writing. Recommend it only as a historical document, not because I appreciate what he said. But with him, I mean, you have to understand that couple, they would find children, and the idea was to record the torture of the child and then use the recording as a come-on during their lovemaking. And both members of it were aroused. Both members of the couple were aroused. So you're talking about where the female in that party was pretty much as bad. You know, she was like bordering on as awful in terms of degree of psychopathy, right? Those are not people who were themselves victims. They were into it. But there are other cases that get a little bit more complicated. And so I think the key is to just sort of take them one by one. More interesting are the offenders that simply have a confederate that helps them, a kind of Igor to their Dr. Frankenstein, where the person is
like Dr. Ann Burgess's book, The Serial Killer's Apprentice.
Oh, Dr. Ramsland, you mean Catherine Ramsland? Yeah. Right. That's a great book.
Oh, yeah.
That's a great book. And but that's what you have. What usually happens there is that there's a very bright, manipulative psychopath, and then a weaker-willed ally. Think of something like Otis Toole, and his partner, right? Your whole story, or think or think of Bono and or Bianchi, right? Bono and Bianchi, that kind of who?
John Walsh.
Yeah.
John Walsh's son, they believe, was decapitated by Otis Toole.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I have in the New Evil. He was such a disgusting guy. In the New Evil, I have a copy of a recipe he wrote for the barbecue sauce he would use in cannibalism. Yes, he was a very sick puppy. And like all cannibals, he would tell you about how people taste like chicken. That's something that cannibals universally say. It's really disturbing stuff. Yeah,
but people say that about everything. Like if it's like a frog leg, like, oh, it tastes like chicken. I don't believe.
Excuse me, I'm saying the wrong thing. They say it tastes like pork, like pork.
That makes a little more sense.
Yeah, pork. Really, really disturbing.
I hope that answers part of your question or some of it.
Yeah, I think.
But why did they take it to the grave like Ian Brady wouldn't confess and say we're this little lad?
Oh, I see. Well, no, I think that's part of the sadism. It's part of the sadism, part of the cruelty.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, you mentioned the Barbie doll killers, Homolka and Bernardo. They were prepared that the sister was going to be disinterred for investigation reasons, and they put into the pocket of the sister a snapshot of themselves grinning sadistically and waving, because they knew she would be pulled out of the ground and the photo would be looked at, right? It was a way of mocking law enforcement. They were thinking ahead to that. That's part of the cruelty, right? You're never going to find this person, and even if you did, you're going to get mocked, right?
Yeah, it's like people. There are people that just
sadists
on that kind of stuff. But anyway, thank you so much for your call. We appreciate it.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
All right.
You're so welcome. Did that answer your question? Good. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Josh, I've always been interested in as a little side subject, people who have a kind of petty sadism, like people in our day-to-day lives that get off on like condescending to the clerk in the bookstore and like being nasty to the waitress or the waiter because it gives them a power trip. You know, those kind of people, the petty little, the petty little sadist.
I've actually stopped going to dinner with people and kind of distant. If you treat like somebody in the service industry or anything that has done nothing to you, and you're just, you're petty, they're below you. I just, I can't hang with that.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. You know, those little tiny little souls, you know, that just, I personally, I never understood it because I see so much greatness in the kind of person who goes out of their way to be kind to people, especially people who don't deserve it. Like that person who could just stay cool-headed and be nice to someone who's like barking and being cruel. And you know, and I'm not one of those people who thinks, wow, you know, underneath all this person's nastiness, I bet they're a wounded soul. Some of them are just dead in the heart. You know, there are people like that. Yeah, but mean-spiritedness, I think, is one of the two traits I consider ugliest in the world: mean-spiritedness and ingratitude. I can't stand those two traits in people. I also, if I had to have a close third, I'd say cheapness. I don't like cheapness. No, really? I don't like that trait. Live it up, you know.
Like Kansas says, champagne and cigars, baby.
No, I just don't like. I don't mean that kind of cheapness. I mean cheapness where it's a reflection of the cheapness of your spirit.
Right.
You know, the kind of person who sees a homeless person and gives them a nickel, you know, or a dime. You know.
Right. Let's see. 505, you're on the air.
Yeah. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Good. Where are you calling from?
I'm from Santa Fe.
Santa Fe. Very good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I was just wondering, because it comes up a lot, you know, I guess it always has, but what apart from, I guess, societal norms or social expectations make someone different who, you know, a couple hundred years ago was older and married a child versus today? If that makes sense.
I mean, it does. So you're saying like what has changed in society for that?
No, more just, I mean, because there seems to be an anomaly maybe with, you know, someone's brain who could be attracted to someone so much younger than them. And was that not the case a couple hundred years ago? Yeah.
It's an interesting question. I mean, let's be completely clear that there can be no rationalization away of the offense of assaulting a child. But I understand the spirit of the question. It has to do with the idea that a long time ago, people lived to be, you know, only, 20 something years old or 30 something years old. And so there was this idea that as soon as you hit puberty, you were, you know, it was considered normal. Sometimes a 15-year-old, a 16-year-old to have children. But I think that what has happened, of course, is that there's been a growing study of and insight into the age at which people can really make mature adult decisions. And it's become clear that until people have more fully formed brains, they're not really able to consent. But it is interesting to think about that despite that there are people that find themselves so drawn biologically to people who have facial features and body features that the average person would find not yet attractive in that way.
Right.
You know, it is interesting that people seem to have these frontal kind of brain abnormalities and perhaps even visual center abnormalities where they could look at a person and see something in them that is arousing. I think that's a paraphilia. I think it's but paraphilias, they're interesting because they're really about associations and context. Like a person in childhood pairing a certain thing with an erotic experience and then finding it attractive. And, and I think that's what it's about. It's about that despite the context of that being illegal and inappropriate, there are some people that have paired that in some way with being attractive. But you would think that there'd be a kibosh. I mean, that's the whole point of what a paraphilia is. The whole essence of a paraphilia is that you are attracted to a living person or thing, that there is a societal and perhaps even biological kibosh on that being appropriate. But it's a really interesting question, but let's just say, I think there is something wrong with the brains and mental health of people that have those attractions.
I'm not endorsing it, but
oh, of course not. But I think it's a clever question, because you're bringing to mind the fact that the context has changed, but biology probably hasn't. But I think it's a hard question to answer, because but anyway, so I hope that addresses it. But obviously those crimes are among the most hideous in the world.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah.
I think it's a good question itself is completely interesting, but when you think about it, there are people that are just that don't I wouldn't say have normal brains like us, but the fact that
right. I mean, I would think so.
Yeah, the fact that, I mean, that to me, there would be no matter what an issue, that it's an issue, but unfortunately it's been a part of culture and cultures for a long time. It just like, who was it? My great grandmother, and I think I find, to me, this is just crazy, but she got married at 13 to a 33-year-old man, and this was like 1915.
Oh, wow.
And, in certain places.
I mean, it seems like that was part, and it wasn't
normal. Yeah, they used to happen sometimes. Yeah.
And so
I think a good comparison would be, for example, I'm sure that in prehistoric times, people are aware that in prehistoric times, men didn't really have societal standards keeping them from essentially doing what we would now consider to be assault, right? Just basically walking up to a female and doing whatever the heck they wish to do. Now, just because that might be in the DNA, right? We're supposed to use our frontal lobe, and control our limbic circuitry because of new societal expectations, which I think are very appropriate. Thank goodness they exist. To hold that back. Just because an animal instinct is present doesn't mean that it's okay. So I think it's sort of like that, but I think on an animal level, people are inclined to do all kinds of gross things that they shouldn't do. But that doesn't make it normal. What's abnormal about it is the lack of desire to inhibit it.
Well, there used to be,
I think even the thoughts are pretty bizarre there too.
Steal a horse and you get hung for it. That was part of culture too. And public hanging, tongue feathering, that stuff's not around anymore. And you're right, Dr. Gary. As a society, you kind of look and those old ways are antiquated. They're not good to do. And so I mean, it is a great question.
Well,
I think it
does kind of make me think about like sorry.
Go ahead.
No, so it does make me think. So, if that's the case, is there sort of a collective consciousness that maybe develops the frontal lobe, or someone could even, a couple hundred years ago, where it was okay, still obviously see that as icky and not right. But it doesn't seem. I mean, I'm sure there are cases where they still didn't act on it.
Society.
But I mean, I think the idea is that as people move along from cave, troglodyte times to now, they're becoming increasingly aware of things like personal space, philosophy, theological ideas, societal expectations, so forth. And then those things do become part of what there's a kibosh on frontally. The whole point of the frontal lobe is whatever it is that you're not supposed to be doing, it's going to put a kibosh on. It's not like the things that there's a kibosh on were dictated only biologically. if we made a new rule that it was, totally outrageous and inappropriate to eat an orange, and you couldn't resist eating one, it would be your frontal lobe failing you, right? I mean, that's the whole thing. So the point is, it simply has to do with, can you control yourself, whether things are coming from biological places partially or coming from society. Thank goodness we've gotten to a point where we understand why it would be inappropriate and outrageous to be drawn to someone who can't make a full consenting decision. But yeah, a long time ago, people did all kinds of things that they didn't have kiboshes on. And I think in that particular example you give, it's because they used to be dead by the time they were, 20 something years old, a lot of them. So they didn't think there was anything wrong with it. But I'm glad that we've come to see that there is.
Right.
But I hope that answers your question. It's a very smart question.
Yeah.
Answers mine.
Sorry, I'm a little cold. I'm outside, but.
And I love Santa Fe. A lot of beautiful things there.
Yeah.
It's a good town. Yep.
Great.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you so much for your call.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Santa Fe in the house. Appreciate it. All right. Moving right along here. Hey, we're doing all right, man. This is something. The connection's good. 360. Where are you calling from? Gary's listening.
Hi, it's Roy. I'm calling from Washington.
Washington.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
You mean DC or Washington State?
Pacific Northwest, baby.
Ah.
Washington State.
Yeah. Oh, I love Washington. Yeah. One of my favorite states in the country.
What do you like more, Santa Fe or Washington?
I like a lot of places, Josh, but I think Washington is the natural.
Well, I have to.
I love the natural beauty of it. Those gorges and it's a
Washington is a wonder. The whole Pacific Northwest is fantastic.
The Pacific Northwest is really pretty.
Yeah. I'm up here too.
Right. Although it's been an epicenter of some of the most horrendous crime in the annals of offenses.
Yeah, Bundy sure loved it too.
Oh, there were a lot of them out there. There's an interesting podcast called Murder in the Rain. Do you know the podcast Murder in the Rain? I appeared on it when I first wrote. They exclusively cover crimes that occurred in that region of the country. That's all they do. Okay. Yeah, it's really interesting.
That is interesting. Go ahead. What's your question?
What's the question?
So I was wondering if you could get into Carly Madison Gregg, the 15-year-old that just got life for killing her mom.
Yeah.
I'm not terribly familiar. I know the case a little bit, but
yeah. And didn't she say that it was because of medication?
Did she? Because
something like that. I
saw the video and she was pretty sneaky about it. She had that gun. She sneaked around the corner and then she went in and shot her.
Right. And didn't she invite a friend?
The body.
Yeah, she saw a friend to see the right?
Yeah, she was just and then she shot prison, her
stepdad.
Right.
Do you think he dodged the bullet with a serial killer?
Well, tell me what your thoughts are. What it is that's the question, and then we'll see what we can say about it.
I'm wondering if she didn't shoot her mom that day, do you think eventually she would have shot up the school or just gone out and just carried out some type of other crime in the same category? Because her trial was just so monotone. She was just a bizarre girl.
Right. Well, the forensic psychiatrist involved, I remember. But I know the forensic psychiatrist involved thought that, she was self-harming and that she was hearing voices and that she, so forth. Look, when females generally, if you look at the statistical trends, commit those kinds of offenses, there's a higher probability that there was mental illness involved, authentic mental illness. But the trouble is that I'd have to know all the details to know whether there was some question of whether that was malingered or what have you. But when a person is experiencing auditory hallucinations, it is not an uncommon reason why a person with mental illness would kill, because you have to understand, you could still know the difference between right and wrong, but if you believe that a voice is telling you to do something, to you it's as real as my voice or Josh's voice, right? So, I would have to know of whether there was authentic psychosis there. But if there was, that does happen. But there are also people who malinger psychosis and have other motivations. So I would have to take a look to know, the details on whether I believe one way or the other. Was she convicted, or is the case still going?
She's sentenced. She's sentenced to life in prison.
The life in prison. Did they think that she was faking, or did they think that she had some psychotic experience authentically, but that she could still appreciate the difference between right and wrong?
You know what? I'm not 100% sure on that. I think that they didn't believe what the reasoning was, and there was circumstances that led up to it. Now the gun, I believe, was just held under the bed, loaded in her parents' room, and she walked right in there and got it, and she did file an appeal today as well. What's that?
I love the passion of
she took the gun. Oh God, where'd she get the gun? She took the gun from somewhere else.
Gotcha.
And then shot her mom, and then went back, texted her stepdad to get him to come home, and then I don't know. I guess went out and found one of her friends to share the body. So, yeah.
Right. I remember that there was
I was just
surveillance. They had like home surveillance footage of this killing, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it captured? Right. And I think that if I remember correctly, I mean, this is something where I need to read about it a little more. But if I remember correctly, she had been writing in a journal things that were suggestive that she was authentically having a mental health crisis, correct? Isn't that true?
Didn't hear that.
Writing a journal. I remember, look in the media about it, and I think you'll see that they found some writings, I think, that suggested it. But the point is that people who have mental illness are not generally going to be violent unless there are certain things happening, right? It's brand new and they've never taken medicine and they're not in any treatment, right? My own work has helped to prove that's the window when you're in the highest risk, right? When you first have a psychotic episode in adolescence, usually, or your early 20s, and you haven't yet gotten treatment. I don't know if she did. The second time you're at great risk is when you've been diagnosed, but you're not taking your medicine. And the third is when you're using drugs or alcohol. That's when people who have serious mental illness are most in danger. Otherwise, they're far more likely to be victims of crime themselves.
And Dr. Gary Kelly here says, and this is what I agree with. She tried to hide the gun on the cameras, which shows, right and wrong.
You know that there's right and wrong. Right. You can be psychotic and know that there's right and wrong.
If you're trying to cover up a crime that you've committed, your insanity plea is not going to go that well.
No, when you're talking about an insanity.
Right. Well, there was a guy.
What happened?
I'm sorry. I watched the guy in an interview today, actually. He was hearing voices. He had a psychotic break, and he ended up, I'm sorry, this is sad, but he ended up killing his 4-year-old son.
Right.
And he called himself in. He said, he did it. He had a psychotic break. Voices were telling him to do it. And he was telling the police in the interview room what was going on. So,
right. But you have to understand that no difference between right and wrong is irrespective of if a person is having positive symptoms of psychosis. Positive symptoms means things that are added to normal behavior, plus mark, right? Like hearing voices, being delusional, or having thought disorder, right? Now, when people are talking about not appreciating the difference between right and wrong, you're mostly talking about disorganization, Your thought is so disorganized. There's some kind of organic brain damage, or you've had a head injury, you're using drugs, alcohol, and that your brain is just not processing information correctly. There's word salad. You're doing it right out in the open. You don't try to hide it. But you can be psychotic and have that appreciation because it just means that there's a premise influencing your behavior that is not real, like thinking that the dog is talking to you and commanding. If you thought your dog was talking to you and told you to kill someone, you might in an organized way kill them because you really believed it. If you were a very religious person and you thought that God told you to kill the children, you might, take a few days to plan to kill the children, and you'd know the difference between right and wrong, but you'd be influenced by something that you believed was real. And that is, when you think about the benchmark of knowing the difference between right and wrong, I mean, the fact is those people are going to be found guilty because because even if a voice is telling you to do it, you could say, well, that's wrong. If you were God, you wouldn't tell me to kill,
See, the difference,
that kind of thing.
the difference between the guy in the interview, and this girl, is the guy in the interview was just bawling his eyes out. The girl, Carly, had no remorse.
The girl had right. Well,
anyways, I've taken up enough.
That's a very important point, because when people are a little bit more motivated by a personality, and they really have gone through mental illness, and now the mental illness lifts, and they're looking at the world through clear eyes, you would expect the individual to experience remorse. The person would say, I can't believe that before I took my meds, I was believing that the devil was telling me to do such and such. I need help, that kind of thing. I don't want to, say anything about that Carly Gregg without looking at it, but I would say generally that a person should experience some kind of remorse. But there are some people who, as part of their mental illness, experience a kind of flattening of their emotions, where they can look like they don't care, or that they're not really appreciating things. So it's impossible to say without looking at the individual case. But I think it's a great question. I really
sure is. And I thank you so much for calling in. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Bye.
Sure.
A great call. We've had good callers. Let's keep rolling. Let's see. We got 702 on.
Putting everybody to sleep, Josh, or what?
Doesn't look like it to me. Go ahead. You're on the air.
Hi, I'm calling from Las Vegas.
Oh, I love it there.
And
no, that's the wrong one. That's
I would like to know. No, Las Vegas.
Okay, got it.
Viva Las Vegas. So, what's the question?
Yes. So I'm so intrigued by the Lori Vallow Chad Daybell.
This is a you question.
Situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. And so what are your thoughts in terms of, do you think he was the driver in that, or was she?
I mean, from everything that I know about the case, it seems like it was kind of an unholy union, that they both sort of had this cultish idea that they both agreed on. And, you see this a lot with just, people that are fanatics, one way or the other. You can be fanatical about absolutely anything. The fact of the matter is, I would think that she would have to be the driver of it. I mean, she seemed to be the one that was, in charge of pretty much everything except protecting her children. I mean, to me, they're both guilty, and that they both should spend the rest of their lives in prison. But I mean, if you want to say, who's more culpable, I don't know. I mean, I really just don't know. I think it's pretty equal.
Well,
What are the
yes, I understand that, but when I watched I'm sorry, but when I watched the trial, at the end, she just went on this really bizarre rant, which made me think she's a little she's not, the elevator doesn't go to the top floor with her.
Oh, there's no question about that. And the thing about it is, and our wonderful mod Mimi J2 in the chat said, is anybody really sane that kills somebody, or in just malice, or look?
Yeah, they're sane by the legal definition.
They're sane, but there's something in them that will go that far. And like Dr. Gary explained earlier, when you think that God is directing you to do something and it's not God, it's just that you've been either brainwashed, manipulated by people, a cult-like behavior, this whole doomsday prophecy kind of stuff. You obviously have major problems, and you would hope that the people in your life, such as your husband or if your children are grown, or your parents, would help possibly get you some help and kind of point that out. But this,
or at least try to intercede, right?
Yeah, but this was such an extreme situation, and just an awful one. Who do you think was the leader?
You're asking the caller, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it was him, because I think she wasn't mentally stable, and was kind of susceptible to being in these weird religious cults. And I think he sort of just sort of took that and manipulated the situation.
Yeah, that's somebody put a good comment here. That the devil made them do something, or but they were relying on a spiritual reason, or that it was divine intervention, that God was working with them to, I don't know, save whatever. I mean, what do you think, Dr. Gary? Do you think that, these are the kind of things that tie together, when you have one person with an idea and then somebody takes it all the way, or they do it together. Right. I think that she was probably manipulated when it came to, thinking that she had some higher calling. But at the end of the day, these are your children. My God would never tell you to do something like that.
Well, he did it.
That's why I'm just so mystified by it.
Abraham doesn't count.
Okay. That was a test, right?
Yeah.
And there is this sort of, listen, I'm Christian, so don't take this the wrong way, but the killing of one's own child is the center of the entire Christian faith. Remember that Christ was crucified, and that was part of God's plan. It's a sort of a very difficult thing to wrap your mind around that idea. It's a very, very disturbing construct, this idea of taking one's own child. It haunts me, horrifies me. But most of the people, you have to understand, in this Vallow thing, to me, it looks a lot more like a cult. And it's a cult thing. And cults are a little difficult, because in a cult, what tends to happen is that you have the person who is leading the cult doesn't usually believe it that much. It's usually the people who have a kind of weaker will, who are more emotionally disturbed, who have personality where they get sucked into it. But the head of the cult usually is a con man or a psychopath. For example, even though he was drug-addled and had these sort of micropsychotic qualities because of his drug use, Charles Manson didn't believe a word of what he was telling people. The point was that he was a control freak who was manipulating people and annihilating their identity and assaulting them, and getting whatever he wanted and preying on them. Right. But the idea is that he didn't believe a word of it. Very rarely do you get these people like, for example, Applewhite, Herf Applewhite, Applewhite, the Hale-Bopp comet guy, who got all of his people to kind of kill themselves.
Oh, right.
So like he truly, believed. And as a matter of fact, it's an interesting thing. We all know the expression, wow, he really drank the Kool-Aid. She really drank the Kool-Aid. People don't realize that that's a reference to Jim Jones, right? With the having the members drink the grape Kool-Aid to commit suicide. But the idea there is he was a psychopath, right? I mean, he didn't drink the Kool-Aid, in terms of the beliefs, right? So, that's what you want to understand. So when you're looking at that whole Lori Vallow thing, I don't know who was the one who believed it more, but usually there's one really, really manipulative character taking advantage of a really disturbed person. That's the typical dynamic. But who knows in that case, because when you get to defending yourself, people have a tendency to, portray themselves differently than what they really believe. I don't know.
Yeah.
But think about what it would take, the amount of influence that would have to be asserted over you to think that it was acceptable to kill one's own children. But I think the reason I mentioned that whole thing about the reason I mentioned that thing about Christianity is that there are some disturbed culty people who think that it takes on a Christian-like quality, a mystical quality, religious quality, this idea of eliminating one's children, purification, the whole thing. If you read the things that they say things like that. Oh, just as the Lord God took his own son, I will take my own child. Because they draw on religious imagery to give the panache of spirituality to what is really a horrendous and disturbed act. That's the whole thing, right? So I hope people understand the spirit of why I raised that point. I mean, I'm a Christian myself, so I don't say it with any negativity.
Well, I appreciate your call.
Thank you.
And I hope that
Thank you.
I hope that gives you some insight. I do think that ultimately she's just, they're both responsible for what happened, but they're just disgusting.
But they have bizarre, culty kind of ideas.
Absolutely,
right?
they do. Let's go.
There's also I'll mention very quickly, since we're in this teaching mode tonight, there's also a phenomenon called the folie à deux, which is where you have two people that when they're together share a delusion. But when you separate them, you find out that one of them is really ill and the other one is just their personality has gotten sucked into it. So when they're together, they believe it. When they're separate, one of them breaks out of the spell and the other one still believes it. Yeah. Then you know who truly had the psychosis.
And
yeah.
I just want to say JPL and Susie B, I'll put your questions up here shortly. We'll take some more phone calls and then we'll get to those as well. All right. So we got 614. You're on the air. Where are you calling from? Australia.
Oh.
Good eye, mate.
Sorry. It's like I hear the birds in the background. How is everyone? I have a question, mainly for, Dr. Gary Brucato. Just in regards to, I know there are so many people that bring up this case. You probably can guess the case I'm going to ask about. But the Jen Soto case, I know it's such a polarizing issue. I don't think it really needs to be. She could have been a victim up to a certain point, and then he can be equally as culpable as a manipulator, as an aggressor, in the sense that he's in terms of predatory behavior. But more interestingly, I'm interested in finding out your opinion on when you've got someone like this who presents or who is a bipolar 2, I think she said she was, and you've got things like instability or impulsivity. How do you discern between a mental health diagnosis and a personality disorder? Because that seems to fit into so many of the cluster Bs, like your BPD, your narcissistic personality disorder, or any sort of antisocial trait.
Right. It's actually a lot more complicated of a question than I think people might realize, right? Because first of all, in my own work, one of the things that I've proposed is that there are some personality disorders that probably represent an incomplete penetrance of the genes for a more serious mental illness. So, for example, I am convinced that some people who have, let's say, borderline personality disorder might have actually been on the way to bipolar disorder, but the genes didn't completely penetrate. Just as I believe that people who are on their way to schizophrenia that didn't fully make it there might demonstrate what we call a cluster A personality. They might be schizoid or paranoid or schizotypal and have those soft features across their lifetime. I wonder about that. I think a portion of people who have personality disorders have those genetics, because if you look at the family structures of some of these people, they're sort of mingled throughout, right? Now, the other thing is, I think the difference is this: a personality disorder tends to start early in life. A psychotic disorder, bipolar disorder, things like that, they tend to start in adolescence. It's like when puberty starts asserting some sort of effect on your developing brain and on gene expression. But I think that personality disorder tends to be something that goes all the way back. Things that happen in prepubescence, like child abuse and neglect and things like that, can have a huge influence, because there's a mixture of the biological and the way a person attaches to the people in their life. I think the things that they're going to have to look for in terms of personality disorder are going to be things like, did Jen Soto have a peculiar way of attaching to an abusive person, knowing that he was abusive, and stayed anyway? Did she attach to a person out of anxiety or fear that she was helpless? Was abuse normalized because she herself had some kind of abuse when she was a kid, since she didn't, see it the same way that the average person might? We don't know. But I think personality disorder is much more pervasive. It doesn't happen in episodes. It's sort of there all the time. It tends to start younger. And what you tend to see is that the problems have to do with these kind of interpersonal things, keeping your relationships going, the way you view people generally, the kind of people you're attracted to, the problems you have at work that tend to be interpersonal, etc. That's very different than a person who is going along, functioning, and then slips into an episode of a mood state or a psychotic disorder. And during that time, they might be experiencing serious problems, and then they recover. Personality disorder is sort of static and very difficult to treat. You don't medicate away a personality disorder. Mm-hmm. I tend to treat personality disorders. I like to treat people with personality disorders, but it's difficult work because it's very tedious. Very difficult, very challenging, and you often are the butt of the person's personality disorder, because you become an emblem of everyone they've ever known, the people that have disappointed them. They could idealize you. They could look at you and see in you, you're the only person that's ever been kind to me. They could totally devalue you. It's very, very difficult, but the treatment is very important. And but I am not a fan of viewing personality disorders as a fault. I don't like that pejorative thing. Oh, they were
aggravating.
Right. I believe that personality disorders they do represent a problem for the individual. What I don't like is when people make a diagnosis of a personality disorder and the person is not suffering because the person doesn't have any remorse. So like a person will say that politician is a narcissist. But the narcissist should know that they have a problem and are experiencing trouble. It's an insult to people who have the mental illness of narcissistic personality disorder to throw that term at a person who has no insight that they're doing anything wrong.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Right. They're causing suffering in other people, but they couldn't care less. And that's where I think you start towing the line between a mental illness and morality. Right? Because if you're a sadist and you have no sympathy, you're a sadist. That's why they took sadistic personality disorder out of the DSM, because people started to think about using it as a defense.
Yeah.
My client, may have abused his wife, Your Honor, but he had sadistic personality disorder. You know what I'm saying? So they took it out because it was Michael Stone wrote about that.
Well, it would be aggravating anyway, wouldn't it? I think that's the mental health diagnosis. I think in this.
Right.
Mitigating for it.
Yeah, but think about how that would be abused, and how.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Like, it's unfair to anyone else that suffers from that disorder.
Well, how would the sadistic person suffer? Where's the suffering? Where's the part that they're impaired because of it? unless it's that their relationships are falling apart and they're coming to their therapist and saying, "Gee, I wish I wasn't sadistic. It's such a problem. Teach me to be kind." That's it.
Well, because if you look at narcissistic, then the empathy extends only towards themselves.
Well, you're getting into the second.
But I see what you're saying. That's a really good point.
Yeah, well, I think you're raising a smart point because you're taking a psychodynamic approach that sadism likely has a kind of unconscious motivation that has something to do with leveling the playing field against people that have been abusive to you. But the trouble is that if a person doesn't have insight into that and is not suffering because of it, it's hard to call it a mental illness, because personality disorders require that you have that impairment, that there's that impairment in psychosocial functioning. So I suppose you could make that diagnosis looking at a person and say, "What do you mean you don't have impairment? All your relationships aren't working." But the definition of it has to have something to do with how you experience it. You're the one that's got to go to treatment, right? So it's a really, really interesting question, because it's a fine line. And what you're picking up on very cleverly is that when they wrote the DSM and categorized these personality disorders, and they were trying to be objective and medical, you have to remember that the roots of psychiatry had their origins in morality, religion, philosophy, and biology. So what do you do with all the problems that are moral? They sort of they squeeze them, they shoehorn them into this wide category of personality disorder. But it's complicated, because I think it's a mixed bag of people with biological traits, some people who are just downright mean, people who have themselves have been hurt, people who have poor coping skills, people that can't internalize objects properly, people with control obsessions, people who can't control their affect, who have a kind of emotional hemophilia, where they have an emotion and it just can't clot, that kind of thing. There's all kinds of personality problems people can develop. But it's a brilliant question, and I appreciate it so much, and I love the accent.
That's a really good point. We're human. We just love to categorize things.
Sorry for my terrible accent.
I have very dear friends.
Sorry.
I have very dear friends.
So much of your time, but thank you.
Okay. Are you familiar with Perth?
Where?
Perth?
Yes, that's in WA. I'm in Queensland.
I have very dear friends.
WA means Western Australia for you non-Aussie.
Yes, Western Australia.
You know what they do for a living? It's very interesting.
Thank you. That was very insightful. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. But do you know what my friends from Perth do for a living? They raise black swans. Isn't that cool?
Black swan. Really?
They have black swans.
There's swans everywhere around here, because we're all coastline mainly.
Yeah, that's what they do. They raise them. Isn't that cool?
But there's no shortage of swans.
Well, they're beautiful.
That is really cool.
Hey, Vegemite's gross, by the way. Do you like Vegemite?
No, you've got to do it right. Just a little bit with butter on toast. Yeah, you've got to get the butter Vegemite ratio.
You want to talk about culture, dude? That's baked into the culture of Vegemite, man. People love Vegemite there. It's crazy.
I can't believe how many Italians there are in Australia. There are a lot of them.
It's a multicultural country, so we've really got a lot of everyone.
And a lot of Vegemite.
Yeah.
For sure. Icicles and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So, all
right. Well, thank you for your call, and
okay,
we'll appreciate you calling in. Thank you.
That was cool. Boy, you really have a wide reach, Josh. You're getting people from all over the world. You've almost completed your Nations of the World collection here with your call.
I'm waiting for Iran to call in. Let's see here. 206, you're on the air.
Hi, I'm Hannah.
Are you from Iran?
Seattle, and I was
from where?
No,
Iran.
I'm not from Iran.
Oh,
no.
Okay, never mind.
Where is
I'm from Seattle.
Seattle.
Oh, Seattle. I thought you said her name was Hannah.
I just thought, because you said, you have a wide reach. I said, I'm waiting to get Iran to call in.
Hannah.
Your name is Hannah. It's a pleasure to meet you, Hannah.
Hannah from Seattle.
Is your name spelled H-A-N-N-A-H?
So,
You spell it H-A-N-N-A-H?
See what happens.
I love a good drum. It's a pleasure to meet you, Hannah.
Yes. Very sorry. Thank you. So I'm surprised that somebody else has asked you about the Lori Vallow case because that one haunts me, and it has a lot to do with the brother or the uncle who sadistically tortured the kids when they were murdered. And then I had listened to your take on the Long Island serial killer, either on this or Chris McDonough's show, about how it seems like he was hunting women and just the sheer terror that they must have felt. And in your ranking system, are both of those, they're just so disturbing, like the highest level of evil.
Oh, no. Rex Hoyerman, the Long Island serial killer, if he's guilty, would be a 22. And the reason is that to fall into that category, simply put, you need to kill more than one person separated in time by a cooling off period. In other words, you have to be a serial killer. And you have to torture in an extremely protracted way, right? So if we look at the bail document where there are accusations of Hoyerman, it says things like that he would set up hard points. Like, you have to know what a hard point is, right? The news kept talking about hard points having to do with the place where you hang a person, where the rope won't break. But I happen to know that hard point is an architectural term that has to do with those little studs that you stick into a wall to hang a tool on, right? Setting up hard points kind of means like setting up a tool shed where you can dangle all the instruments you're going to use for torture or anything else, to fix a car or whatever, right? So you have to picture the notion of the image of setting up an area where you can spend some time, days maybe even, with a victim and engage in every kind of torture with category 22. In the other,
You have a vault.
Yeah, say that again. Yeah, he had a vault. We don't know if that's where this would have occurred, but he certainly is referencing having an area set aside for playtime, which was torture. And but the other case you reference, that's not a serial killing situation. And if that person's guilty, that's more of like an elimination murder or a kind of an emotional kind of a thing. That's very different, and you don't have that torture element. So 22 would be way too high in that situation. Yeah.
Well, it is elimination, and he did murder somebody in July, then 2 people in September, and then one was the young autistic boy was tortured and buried alive, and then the other one was just tortured. So that's why to me it seems like,
if that really happened, then once you get into serial killing territory, you start getting higher up on the scale, right? And the lowest category you could be in as a serial killer is category 7, but that's only if the only reason for the serial killing is ego, like angels of death and mothers who repetitively kill their children, things like that, right? They can be there on the scale, but most often they're at least a 14. With the 14, the motivation is mostly like knocking people out of the way repetitively for their money, killing witnesses, all those people involved in criminal enterprise, but there's no real sexual motivation. Once you get to 15, you start getting into people that are doing it for the sport, the thrill, the spree of it, and you start moving up the scale. 17 is where we wind up when you deal with a sexual motivation. 18 is where there's low-grade, non-protracted torture, and by the time you're committing multiple acts of severe protracted torture with many instruments and a area set aside like David Parker Ray had in a trailer, then you're talking about a 22. And 22s are rare, thank God. But some of the worst serial killers we all have ever heard of are in that category. If you read The New Evil, I give 5 cases of some of the worst ones. That's not for everybody to read. Let me tell you, I've had people write to me and say, like, I can't get over that. I read that 22 category and it changed me, that kind of thing. But I think I love the question. But remember, look, you asked about this one instance of possibly like, what if a person put a child in the ground and an autistic child and torture? Yeah, of course, that's a severe and protracted torture.
After they were duct taped.
That would be a severe and protracted torture.
Arm to arm.
But you'd have to do that repetitively to be in 22. One isolated incident in which there's torture doesn't put you in 22. 22 means you repetitively kill with torture. So you'd have to have 2 or more victims where you right. So that's the thing.
And then if I can have,
it's a pleasure.
one more very quick question is: do you have any idea how Rex was able to get away with this for so long? It just seems unfathomable.
Wait, and let me just say this really quick. I'm trying to repeat the question. The question is, she wants to know how long Rex, how was Rex able to get away with this for so long?
Well, first of all, we have to say if Rex is guilty, because he's a person that hasn't even had a trial. But
Right.
if he is guilty, I think the answer is that it had to do with him being someone who studied the methodology of law enforcement and the methodology of serial killers, and allowed himself to adapt in such a way that you wouldn't link all of these different offenses. He was so aware of things, I'm sure, how to eliminate DNA. I mean, we know from the bail document how to prevent leaving hairs, how to, not get caught on cameras, etc. So that I think right, he evolved.
Yeah, that affidavit was.
It was wild. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I think he studied the way that we create case linkage between cases, and then intentionally would throw things off. Yeah, go ahead.
I think you read your book.
There are some pretty infamous offenders that I think did. I'm not sure if he did, but there are a couple. That I think did. I have a very terrible sense did.
That wouldn't surprise me at all.
But listen, that's going to happen with anyone
who writes
a true crime book. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your question and your.
Thank you so much. Yes, I appreciate it.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Some very intelligent callers, Josh, don't you think?
I can't even keep up with them. Let's see here. JPL says, my question is regarding Stephen Stearns and his parents' relationship.
I love this point. The lakeside lawyer. Sometimes that might know too much.
That's true, actually.
Yeah, it's scary. Mm-hmm.
I believe that Stephen Stearns' former friend mentioned how Mrs. S always bailed her son out. Did he learn to manipulate from parents?
Well, what do you think of that, Josh?
I think that anybody that is raised by somebody that is a manipulator, it kind of gets baked into their, they see it, they see the benefits of it, they see how it works. So, I mean, I don't know about Stefan, or Stefan or whatever, however you pronounce his name. But I do think that you can absolutely learn to become a manipulator from parents. And I also think that your parents can turn you into somebody who can manipulate just kind of by giving them a pass at every single, step. The parents may not even need to be a manipulator. They can just, they know how to manipulate their parents, and their parents let them off the hook all the time. Now to get to the scale that's Stefan Stearns, this guy's a monster. The things that he's accused of are as bad as you can imagine.
But he's not a serial killer, and he did not engage in protracted torture. So on the scale in the new evil, he would be, somebody that we would have to. He didn't repetitively kill, to our knowledge.
That
so
we
the
know
highest possible score that he could currently achieve is 16. 17. Now, I'm not saying that as if he should aspire. I mean, in terms of his awfulness, he is horrifying. Absolutely. 16 is the category for people who have not killed more than once, but who have engaged in heinous acts, which can include sexual offenses.
Well, I think that crimes against children
Yeah, they're as bad. They're horrifying, disgusting. I
worst.
can't even bring the guy up without getting nauseated.
He's gross.
Right.
It's hard to even look at him. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I think that he probably just was babied and let off the hook. But it goes so much further than that. I mean, he obviously has a sick mind and has no problems trying to quote unquote clean up whatever mess he got himself into at the expense of, as you call it, Dr. Gary, the elimination murder. And so you do your malfeasance for as long as you can, you get away with it as long as you can. And then for some reason, at some point, it's, it's hard to, I'm not saying that you're saying that blaming the parents. It's just it's insane that he was doing this. But I think that, say he gets away with it. He's going to do it again.
Well, let me put it like this. I think what is manifest, right? I mean, this is not something where it's like a matter of opinion, just based on what we know. What seems to be going on is that there's some kind of perversion where somebody is attracted to children. And then in addition to that, he has a personality that is manifestly abusive, controlling, he couldn't tell the truth to save his life, etc. He also has, you can see, just listening to him, he's kind of nature-oriented, detached, interested in, being apart and isolated. There's an oddness to him. I think he's odd, controlling, and perverse. And, you put that combination together, it's not an unusual mix in somebody who is that kind of offender. What makes him unusual is that type of offender, when they lean more in the odd direction than the manipulative direction, they tend to be the type that just like opens a car door and snatches a kid because they can't talk. They're too weird to kind of schmooze and manipulate and groom or whatever. But this guy has that manipulative, sadistic, controlling quality, like the guy who says, I'm going to be your best friend. I know your biological father isn't here. I'll take you under my wing. Oh, this will be our little secret behind mommy's back. It's really disturbing stuff. And there is no question that poor kid, Madeline, was in hell. I mean, for years. I mean, you could what I most want to know is, why did she need to be eliminated when she turned 13? That's the $1 million question. Did she age out of what he found attractive? Did she know too much? Did she become aware that what was happening to her was something that she needed to tell someone about? Did she have a boyfriend at school or something, and he was worried that she was going to tell someone? Did she get pregnant? I mean, who knows? I only know that something happened that, like a switch, made age 13, the time that she needed to be eliminated in his mind. And I think that's going to be the most interesting part of the story in terms of what made this perverted guy do what he did.
Right.
Don't you think? Because if he had never killed before, he escalated to murder. It wasn't part of the sexual thrill, as far as we know. Why do people do that? They tend to escalate to get rid of a witness, or because they've asserted so much force that the person dies. That's part of the abuse. They don't tend to escalate because they're bored and want a greater thrill. It tends to be that. I also think he's too old to have this perverted dynamic for the first time. Usually they start doing that way younger. So my expectation is that if he's like other people who commit these offenses, we're going to discover stacks of stories. And remember, there was even a story about him working in Disney World.
Yeah, I've seen the photo.
To access to being able to touch children, right?
Yeah,
and so, I mean, there are other offenders who did that. Think of Edward Paisnell, the Beast of Jersey, who dressed as Santa Claus so that kids could, be on his lap and everything, and then he would break into houses and abduct children, right? Or think about John Wayne Gacy dressing as a clown and having kids climbing all over him, and he was perverted sexually, right? So for some of these offenders, this is a means of experimenting with touching, right? So we don't know how Disney World might have figured in. And also, I think it goes along with this fantasy-oriented quality, his visual and fantasy-oriented quality. So,
Thanks. 706, you're on the air.
706. Okay.
Is that me?
706, I think so.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Hello. You notice, Josh, we've never had a male caller.
Yeah, I've noticed.
I've never called in before. Okay, so
Sure.
I wasn't sure how. Okay, my question's for Dr. Brucato, and it's not really a question. And I watch all the cases that you're discussing tonight, but what I'm more interested in is trying to find the answers to how do you differentiate.
Uh-oh.
Can you hear me?
There you are. How do you what? Differentiate?
Okay,
I think. Yeah.
Okay.
How do you differentiate?
Yeah. Okay. How to differentiate between I'm trying to decide between whether someone has other underlying factors, disorders, or they've been diagnosed with schizophrenia. And so it's kind of a family member kind of situation. But I've been all along in this person's life, I'm a teacher, and I've been pointing out things, the whole time about their life. Okay.
If you're listening, if you got us in the background, turn us down.
Okay.
Hear myself. It's a little weird.
All right. Yeah. Now you're down. Good. Okay. Yeah. Because I stopped it. Okay. So what I'm saying is there's been a lot of things going on. I'm just going to give you in a nutshell some things. Okay. The child, he's an adult now. Okay. So he just turned 30, but he was the youngest of three to college educated parents. He, growing up, like in middle school years, he had a strong desire to be popular, but up until then he had difficulty making friends because he had kind of an obstinate defiant disorder, and he didn't, get along. Like he would start arguments and things like that. And then, during school, he became like in the middle school years, sort of apathetic, wouldn't do his work unless his mother paid him for A's on his report card. But he was very capable, very bright. So, I always felt like he was manipulating. And he kind of developed this kind of entitled personality and attitude during that time, where he would only wear certain brand clothing. And if, she didn't buy that, then he wasn't going to school. But then at that same time, he started developing an onset of an anxiety disorder that eventually got him on like benzos or whatever. And he was taking, prescription medication for his anxiety. And then later that became called depression. And so they put him on antidepressants. During teens and college, when he was going to college, he lived pretty close to the campus, even though he had a dorm on campus. He would come home all the time because, he'd want to rob the house for food and do all this. He just had that traditional failure to launch thing. And so then, he started like not respecting boundaries. So even like, with me, an adult person in his life who's a family member, he would challenge me with these arguments. So he would ask me questions, my opinions of things, but then he would try to create, like he would then, penalize me for my answer by arguing. And I would tell him, that that's not the kind of relationship that, I want to have with you. But then something happened. He had a car accident and he had a head injury. And the head injury wasn't the worst thing. It was more of like he
hurt his neck, so he started going to the chiropractor. So he didn't have a concussion or any, major thing, but he did hit his head on the windshield. And so there's some discussion that maybe that caused the onset of all this other stuff that's going on. But when the doctor's offices stopped giving him his benzo medication, then he started experimenting with like illicit drugs, that kind of thing. But he wanted to stay legal. So he started doing things like kratom and different things that he could get. He would order things in the mail. Well, now the situation is he's having a very difficult time. He's had to, he's checked himself in, going to harm himself a couple of times. And but then he'll go in and do a few days in inpatient hospital, then come back to the house. Now, there have been some explosive times when, his parents have said, you've got to go get some help or you got to get out because he's still living at home. But he refuses to have any kind of like brain scans or anything. He's always been kind of also a little hypochondriac. So like there's always something wrong with him. He checks his food. He's a little, obsessive compulsive.
I hope you're going
to get to the bottom of
I hope you're going to
whether or not he might have good. I can't hear you. What?
No, I just want to be because I want to be clear that I'm not going to be able to directly address any of the story you're telling because it's too clinical of a. I can't respond because it's too much about an individual where I'd be giving thoughts about a person that I can't give any thoughts on like this in this forum. But what I'm going to say something generally because I do want to respond to you. You're very thoughtful.
Okay.
Paul, is there any other information you want to give?
Just try to just condense the question because I'm having a little trouble following along as well.
Oh no, I think she's presenting. Actually, I think she's presenting a very beautifully linear story.
I'm the one that's having
but a lot of detail, and but I feel bad because at the end of it, I'm not going to be able to. I mean, I have plenty I could say, but I can't do it here. But and I wouldn't because there's no dynamic.
Okay.
Like it. But
a couple more bullet points.
Yeah.
And then I'll let you give me the general because that's really what I was kind of getting at. So now everybody pretty much has to walk on eggshells because you never know when that next word, not even statement, but word is going to offend him because he gets easily offended. And he just crosses all, boundaries, like any kind of boundaries. And a weird thing that happened, one of the reasons why he checked himself in is because he had what he said was some unnatural motivations toward someone, one of the younger children in the family. And that's what made me think about this. It was like, the child sat on his lap and I think he had some kind of physical response to it. And I didn't think that, it was anything that it was a big deal, but he made a big deal about it. And
I am sure
everybody.
If someone is in a treatment, I'm
So
sure.
now this is the question.
All right.
Before
we progress, I want to say
all the time. Can some?
Go ahead, Gary.
No, but before the question progresses, I am sure because there was reference to treatment dynamic, people are monitoring the safety of the people around the individual. That is standard in individuals that are treating people with these conditions. So, but that's important because if there's any reason to really believe that someone is even questionably at risk like that, a professional is going to, is going to have to look into that. So I just want to make sure that people don't think that you're suggesting that there's some kind of risk and it's being, no one's looking into it. I'm sure, right? I mean, you're saying that it's being assessed, monitored, right? Yeah. I don't want people to think you're saying
everybody's.
Yeah.
No, I definitely agree because, that danger always exists. But, the whole going down the rabbit hole thing where, a person who has attention-seeking behavior from the beginning, who is entitled, spoiled, gets their way because they're the baby of the family. And over the years, it just keeps getting worse and worse. And then primarily my question is, like kratom and different drugs like that. I know there's drug-induced psychosis,
Right.
but are there like clinical tests or brain scans or something that could reveal something that would say, yes, this person has schizophrenia, or, chemical tests that can be done or is it always just a psychological diagnosis?
Okay. I think that gives me a good place to kind of give the general answer I'd give, but I do want to say
a little bit of a delay, so he's going to answer that on the other side. I appreciate your phone call. Thank you so much.
I do want to say, because I always like to come at things from a place of compassion, and I really do. I can hear, that there's a lot to say in a very difficult situation, and there is a genuine curiosity and concern and all that, and so we're here to kind of offer compassion all the time, because it is very difficult to have a family member dealing with those conditions. That was an area of my specialization and expertise for about 15 years. I contributed to the literature on early psychosis. I treated it, and I am well aware of how challenging it can be to families, to society, to the individual. So I'll definitely say that. Now, what I'm going to say generally is that what makes these things a little difficult is that you can see a kind of chicken or the egg thing, where there are some people who may have a genetic predisposition to a psychotic disorder, and then something like having a head injury or using drugs like marijuana, for example, even can precipitate the first episode if the individual is having that experience at a young age. But there are some people where you wonder if what looks like a psychotic disorder can actually be explained by brain damage, drug use, things like that. In order to do that, you'd have to do a very meticulous breaking down of a timeline of what comes first, at what age, etc., to have an opinion like that. And I cannot do that in this situation. Secondly, it is very, very important to understand that a person is not only one's psychiatric diagnosis. A person with schizophrenia still has a personality and can have a personality disorder. A person with schizophrenia can have behavioral problems that have nothing to do with the psychosis. A person can, have mood issues or anxiety or whatever. And what makes it even more tricky is that in that kind of pre-phase to having a first episode, a person can have anxiety, depression-like kind of symptoms, that what we call negative symptoms, that can predate being delusional, hallucinating, having thought disorder for the first time or in more severe form. And yes, it is true. There are documented cases of kratom causing psychosis. Absolutely. There are cases of that. In a person who's already got a predisposition, it may be that it intensifies it or brings it out more. So it's a really complicated thing. I don't think anyone should be touching something like kratom or any of those kinds of things. I just don't understand why somebody, blessed with a human brain would feel the need to put something like that in themselves. I always thought, in general terms, that people do that as a kind of a cheat to try to have a mystical experience. It's like a way of wanting to have this high mystical kind of thing, open your brain up or whatever. But it's not really coming from a mystical place. It's coming from manipulation of your brain. It's like a pseudo mysticism. A mystical spiritual experience comes from outside of yourself, right? God has, revealed something to me. That's very different than a person pumping his brain up or her brain up with drugs and having these kind of experiences. And so I think it's a pseudo mysticism. And I'm not really sure why that's necessary. But, I understand addiction. Once a person goes down that path, absolutely. Of course, I understand that. And that's a pitiable state. But anyway, that's the only thing I could say, is to speak generally like that. But my heart goes out to you as somebody who clearly loves somebody.
And we appreciate the question, the call. We have others to get to here.
Yeah.
405, go ahead.
Yeah.
I apologize for following up with this question ahead of time. However, my question is also personal. I am a person who had gastric bypass more than 25 years ago. I have Arnold-Chiari brain malformation and had to have surgery on that in 2017. I have not been able to return to work as a nurse. And I've always been very interested in the psychology profession. And I am a true crime lover. So here's what's going on. I have a problem with bottoming out on my sodium. And so it presents itself as psychosis. I have since been labeled as schizophrenic. I think bipolar was one. They gave me all kinds of labels. But then what ended up following up is after they discharged me from the mental hospital, I immediately went to the ER because I knew what was going on. Now, keep in mind, my husband had taken me to 3 different ERs before because he knew what was going on. And I finally took myself, and I had the state of mind to be able to tell them myself what was going on. And I ended up having ended up going into VTAC over it because I had bottomed out on sodium so badly because they had put me in a mental hospital. And I wasn't receiving the care I needed. And as one who has that and has to deal with that, first of all, I feel like I have a record now. And I don't believe I have those issues. But Dr. Brucato, what's your opinion?
Well, obviously, I can't make any kind of judgment about your particular story because I don't know your background, and this is not the forum for it. But I will say this: I think that a lot of people who talk to me about these experiences have a hard time because part of the nature of those kinds of conditions is that by definition they mess with perception and a person's interpretations of events, and so it can be very difficult to sort out in one's mind, are people trying to help me, are they trying to hurt me? And that's going to be a personal path for you. But I really do believe that you have to, in whatever way you take this, you have to make some kind of meaning out of the experiences that you've had. You've had extraordinary experiences, and I think if used the right way, you could do something very special in this world. There are a lot of people out there, 1 in 10,000 people have psychotic experiences, and there's very little out there for them in terms of what to read, who to listen to, who to guide them, who to shepherd them. It puts you in a position of having a very special voice. And I think that when you kind of come to sort out, hopefully, in your own mind, come to sort out whatever the heck happened to you, hopefully, a professional can help you where it's not in this form, because I think you need the advice of someone to help you sort out everything. That's your business. But I think that when you do sort it all out, you're in a very unique position to being able to help people. And I think, I'd really love it if you did that, because, you have had some very profound experiences. Look at Josh. Josh is a person who's had difficult experiences, and look what he's doing. He's turned it into a way to guide people to a happier life and insight, into goodness, into the light. And you can do that too. In other words, instead of obsessing over the why, think instead about how to make some kind of meaning out of it, and what it is that you can do with your life that has a special purpose. And I can tell from listening to you for just a moment on the phone, what a kind person you are, and that you feel like you're misunderstood. And I think that there's something about you that has a kindness, and I think it is very important to have people listen to you. It sounded like part of your story was that you felt that you were being judged without people having all of the information. So I don't know, what that means to you to hear somebody say that, but I think there's a lot of goodness in you, and I can hear also that you're a very bright person. So Josh, I don't know if you would echo that, but I think that life is all about whatever it gives you and kind of turning it into some kind of a purpose, and making goodness out of it, and you certainly did.
I mean, you just do the best you can, and with every day is not going to be perfect, and not every day is going to be easy. Some days are better than others. Obviously, we all go through that, but you can only play the cards that you're dealt, and however you can kind of work that into every day to try to be. I mean, I guess the goal of every day is just to be better than you were yesterday, be a better person, be a nicer person. And it's very disheartening when people, when you want somebody to listen to you, you think about it from the other side, then somebody wants you to listen to them, and hopefully you treat them with that same sort of respect as if you don't have anybody to talk to. Right. So if you say, hey, I need you to listen to me, and it can't just be a one-way thing. You know what I mean? And we get a lot of that in society.
Well, I think that one of the things the caller put a spotlight on, which is something that, she could write about or talk about, is that it is true. I have seen it with my own eyes that members of the medical profession, the mental health profession, they're often so busy and so caught up in their theory that they can miss the humanity in a person. For example, if you've ever been in an emergency room and you're trying to rattle off your whole story, and they're kind of going, yeah, I've got 30 people to look at. I don't have. Now, listen, you have to have sympathy that they don't have any time. But the fact is that people are more complicated than a bundle of symptoms. And, what I have always tried to do is to say to a person, those are things for the insurance company and to understand, how to treat you and so forth. But I want to know who you are under that. Who are you really? What really brought you in? When I did ER work, I did my best to squeeze in that humanity whenever I could. And I just think sometimes when you get caught up in thinking of people as biology, you miss who they are. Carl Jung used to say that when people get caught up in the biological, it's like trying to describe a cathedral by talking about all the bricks. A cathedral is an experience. It's larger than the bricks. It's greater than the sum of its parts, right? It's majestic. It's spiritual. It stands for something. And I think that's what happens with some people. The key to this whole thing is, and I think if it's okay, I hope I can take a minute and say this, Josh. I can slip into a bit of long-windedness, but what I will say is maybe more than a bit. I think that what the call really makes me think about is the idea that I think we are all called to ennoble whatever experiences we've had that are negative. You have to take that thing and channel it into your little kind of story and point it toward the light. And that's the whole thing. I mean, as a simple example, think of Lincoln. Think of Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was a profoundly depressed person who had no real interest in being president, who thought about cutting his own throat, literally, right? He was married to a psychiatrically disturbed Mary Todd, his wife. people repetitively made fun of him. They called him, you know, the original baboon, the original gorilla, the original etc. They mocked his appearance. They thought he was gangly. They thought he was boring. They thought he was stupid. He had a hard time getting together with women. You know, everyone he ever loved died. You know, from his, you know, the woman who raised him to, you know, the one woman he fell in love with, you know, when he was young. And, you know, what really happened for him was he took all of that identification with otherness and outsiderness, and he channeled it into, you know, this moment when he was in a New Orleans slave market and could identify with these people in shackles who were being treated like livestock, slaves. And then he ennobled that war by making it about this divine thing, this overcoming of this darkness. And by ennobling that sense of otherness, he became a hero. And that's what I think a hero is. A hero is a person who's down in the mud and ennobles it. They, you know, and so when people call in with these stories, you know, they move me profoundly because they are people in the middle of their own story. It's like a book that has a redemption arc or a kind of a story of overcoming. And so many of the people that call, they're surrounded by people who beat them down and make them think that their arc is over. It's just.
Let me interrupt you for a second.
No, please do. I hope I'm not.
Somebody will get pissed off about it, but I'm going to do it anyway.
No. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. And that's why it really does bother me when we do these kinds of shows and there are people in the chat that say, move on, next caller, this and that. This is a live show. We're taking real live phone calls from real life people. I'm not here to humiliate anybody. I'm not here to drop them like that.
You're very kind. You wouldn't do that.
I want to listen and hear what they have to say. And it is bothersome. If you don't like the way the show runs, I can understand it. It's not as easy as it looks. Okay. Where it's a live show. I got 3 screens in front of me and we are trying to just listen to people and help however we can.
Well,
and we, by the way, we appreciate Dr. Gary's time.
No, I really believe it's helping people, so I don't mind. I'm a person that really, honest to God, believes in emptying oneself, you know, and I'll use myself up if I really believe it's doing any good. I really will. I'm honest to God mean that. I think, Josh, that you have to understand that when people are troubled by things that have happened in their lives, the average person doesn't want to hear that. It's very hard to tolerate it. To tolerate it because it activates your own stuff. To tolerate it because there's a lot of detail to it. To tolerate it because we don't want to hear those things about other people suffering, whatever. It makes us uncomfortable and we want to kind of slip out of it. But the fact is,
you know, look, we can handle that. If somebody calls in, we're like, look, we can't really discuss that. Dr. Gary can't diagnose anybody.
Oh, I can, and I won't. I try to be very professional about it, but that doesn't mean that I can't treat everybody like a human being.
Right. And that's kind of our goal here. And that's what we're trying to do. So I apologize if, you know, the flow of the show isn't what you think it should be. We're doing our best here. There's a lot of people that call in. And so let's just.
I like what you do. You keep it up. That's why I come on all the time.
I appreciate you being here. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
807, you're on the air.
Good evening, Josh and Dr. Gary. This is Margot calling. I'm part of your international viewership calling from Canada.
Oh, I love the name Margot. Like Margot Channing? Who are you named after? Are you named after? Yeah. It's a great.
Yes, my mother was French Canadian, and I'm named after a great aunt.
Ah, so you spell it the French way.
What my question? Yes, Margot.
Mm-hmm.
Not to be confused with EAUX.
That's a whole other thing. Yes.
Anyway, what my question is
firstly, I would like to just validate what my understanding has been from listening to you and Dr. Burgess in the past, which is part of what precipitated the need for the behavioral sciences unit was in part because of the serial killings and the activities that were going on and trying to understand the mindset and the similarities, differences, what have you in that. My other understanding is some of that activity in men was precipitated because of some of the additional rights that were given to women. So the ability to control their own bodies, birth control, the ability to leave, poor relationships, etc.
It's a hypothesis.
Those assumptions, which they want to validate.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's a hypothesis that.
So based on that hypothesis, okay, and based on that hypothesis, then what I'd like to understand is, as we go through the generations and more younger men from the time of infancy are brought up in that environment where these empowered women are around them, are they more likely to accept them? And as such, over time, do we see those crimes diminishing? Do we have statistical data that acknowledges that?
Actually, yes. Serial killing has been dropping dramatically since the late 1990s, but this is probably because they're getting caught quicker because of DNA, but it is dropping off. That's why you're seeing a lot more mass murder. I think that the anxiety that is motivating those types of outrageous offenses right now has shifted away slightly from these kind of cultural concerns that you're describing to having a lot more to do with existential concerns about, political matters, concerns about, he's seeing a lot more of the mass shootings since the turn of the last century. But you're raising a very important point, which is, are we seeing a kind of detoxification of young men? Well, unfortunately, the inclination to, of young men to kind of act out in these outrageous ways towards women, which has a lot to do with testosterone, is something that's been there across all of time and space. But there was an explosion of it in the wake of the sexual revolution, which has raised this interesting question of whether that has to do with men losing a kind of a power structure that society had given them. Certainly doesn't justify it, and it certainly doesn't mean blame the victims in that it's like to suggest that it's some kind of bad thing that there's been liberation. I think that's great. And the reality is, I think that time is going to tell. Unfortunately, what is really happening is that what you're getting is a whole world of men who still remember the quote unquote good old days in their mind and are trying to shove us back into a time machine and get us back to the days of subjugation and the days of romanticizing the days when women had less freedoms, when white people and rich people were the people in charge. I mean, all you've got to do is pick up a copy of Project 2025. It's like a blueprint for trying to take people backwards into that kind of way, which I don't think has anything to do with the Bible or the flag. Those are things that are wrapped around a desire for subjugation and power. And I think that's what that's really about. I think you're getting right to the heart of it when you ask that question. So I think that in order for that to change, the power structures have to be different. People have to be okay with the sharing of equality with people that are not white, rich men. Or I would even add to that white, rich, heterosexual men or cisgender men. So I think, it's important to understand that thing of putting people into categories and subjugating them, it's all about fear. And you have to make people afraid as if they're going to lose their power. It's like saying there isn't going to be enough dinner to go around at the table. You're not going to get your share because that person's going to, is going to try to take some of it. I think it's much more important to move in the direction of understanding that there's going to be enough to go around. We don't need to subjugate anybody. And I really think that when you wrap things in religion and politics and nationalism and all that, you make people forget that there's an irrationality, you know, an irrational quality to some of those ideas. Because the fact of the matter is, to think that women and men are not equal just because they have different genders, different biological sex, is sort of dumb. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. I mean, to think that somebody is less than you because of the degree of melanin in their skin is dumb. I mean, it's a stupid idea. I mean, you get what I'm saying? I mean, it's dumb to think that somebody has less value because they happen to be born to out of privilege is dumb, right? To think that you should hate a person because every fiber of their being happens to be attracted to people that are of the same sex, or they don't feel right in their own skin. There's a kind of dumbness to it. And but I understand that when there are religious prohibitions and they're really heartfelt, you really believe them on those grounds. That's different. I understand that. But what I have an issue with is when people pretend to be coming at it from that perspective because it's an excuse to hate people, right?
Yeah.
And that's the way I feel, for example, about the way America was in the days of slavery. I think a lot of people tried to wrap that up in the Bible and politics, but it was just dumb. It was a horrifying excuse to subjugate human beings to work for you and abuse them and trade them like cattle. So, I think that's ignorance. And I think that your call gets right to an important question. Yes, with time, we hope that there's going to be an education of children, especially young men, to learn to control themselves, to learn that they have no right to beat people up or use guns or any of the stuff they do to express virility or desire for power. I think they need education. They need sensitivity. They need to see that women are a force that's not going to be put back in the box, right? That ain't happening, right? Forget it. And I think, you ask a fabulous question. I love it because it gets right to the heart of the new evil, right? What happened in the 1960s? I think the short answer is a lot of people lost their power. And as a consequence, it expressed itself through every manner of aggression, because it's like, you're not taking my plate of food, I'll kill you before you try to take it. That's a primitive caveman brain reaction, but I think it happened on a cultural level. And but those days are over.
Yep. And I appreciate your
committing those crimes.
Yeah.
I'm still committing them, of course, but those days are over in terms of.
I appreciate your response.
Oh yeah, I hope you appreciated it in the sense of agreeing with some of it. I hope that you didn't find any of that to be distasteful to you.
No, not at all. Actually, in fact, today/yesterday, the 30th, in Canada, we just acknowledged Truth and Reconciliation Day.
Oh, good.
For the Indigenous population of Canada.
I work with,
and so I'm very aware.
Yeah, population very dear to me. Ann Burgess and I do research on Indigenous people. I'm about to start working with the Cold Case Foundation to actually go visit Indigenous people, Indigenous tribal authorities, and teach about violent crime. In the Cold Case Foundation, we work on a lot of those cases. Chris McDonough works very often with murder cases among Indigenous people. I love that you brought up that topic.
Yeah. And thank you so much.
That's something I think that is so important. It's the education that we need.
Yeah, we don't have anything like that here.
It's about education, and it's about teaching people that they don't need to be afraid. So much of the way that you manipulate people with this stuff is to wrap it up in things that kind of give a panache of respectability to what is really fear and hatred. Mm-hmm. That's the whole thing. You wrap it up in that stuff, and then you sell it as something that it isn't. It's like selling cigarettes or other things that destroy you, wrapped up in something handsome. But the reality is that underneath it, it's just hatred, hatred and ignorance. And but when it's real, if spirituality is real, it's really coming from that. That's a much more complicated point, because there are people who do have faith that makes them concerned about changes in the culture. That is different. I don't think that can be written off. That's a real thing to those people, to those individuals. But I think that the problem is that this is a country where people have diverse beliefs, and they cannot all be stuffed into one box we're in a country where people have the freedom to believe different things. That's the whole thing. So, but I really appreciate you. You're an exceptionally bright person, and I hope you're using that in some way to help people.
I try to. I try.
Keep it up.
All right. Thank you so much for your call.
What a smart call.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, I think so. All right, hold on here. Let's go ahead. A couple more. Go ahead, caller. You're on the air.
Hi, is this me?
Yep. 347.
Oh, hi. Yes, thank you. Okay. Hi, my name's Kelly. I'm a long time listener of the lab and the interview room.
Nice.
I appreciate what you guys do so much.
Good for you.
Dr. Brucato, you're such an inspiration.
Oh, I don't know. What do I inspire other than meds? So wait a minute. Where are you from?
I'm from New York.
Oh, you're from New York. Okay, well, great. I know which part of New York.
I'm in Long Island, from Long Island. I've spent a good deal of time in the city going to school. So either Long Island or West Harlem.
Do you study something forensic?
Yeah.
Yeah, I figured. And
Yeah,
what's
so you know what? So Dr. Stone was actually, I don't know, in my 20s, I had a breakup. I spent like a month in bed, and the idea had just come on, and most people was, it got me through, and actually inspired me to go to, I went to John Jay for forensic psychology, and it was all because of Dr. Stone.
Oh, I love that. That's wonderful. Good for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Such an inspiration.
We need more women in forensics. Women are disproportionately affected by violent crime. So I love the idea of women becoming more and more involved in it.
That's why I think we don't get very many male callers, or any for that matter.
But that's so cool.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and I've certainly. No. So when I first saw you on the interview room and learned that you worked with Dr. Stone, it was always my dream to meet him in the city with his little fur hat on. Oh my god, he was so great.
I miss him every day.
I love your book, and I have.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sure he seemed like such a kind, great person. I have so many questions, but one that just it's not a recent case, but it's one that I think that I've found sticks with people, which is the Watts case. And I was curious what your thoughts are. And I think a big reason why it's so haunting, because it's, a family annihilation that, it unfortunately happens all the time. And the motive behind it is kind of, common, but I think what's really haunting about it is the way that he disposed of his family. And it just didn't, it doesn't, there's just something there that doesn't match. And even in the interview he did with the FBI agent and the agent from CBI when they went to, prison and interviewed him for a few hours, a couple of years ago, they didn't get a reason of why why, so I'm just curious what your thinking is as to why he would. It's one thing to do the act, but it's a whole other thing to dispose of these babies in such a gruesome, just such a horrible way. I mean, I think it's what haunts me the most about that case. And you can see it, I certainly see within the true crime world, it's a case that sticks with everybody. And I think that's why. It's just the way that he, the way that it ended, the way that he did that. And I was just curious, what your.
Did you say John?
With that?
You're talking about the John List case? I missed the case?
Chris Watts.
Oh, the Watts.
No.
Oh,
Chris Watts.
You're talking about Chris Watts.
Yeah.
Well, you're somebody that, you're clearly bright and have studied forensics. Why don't you talk a little bit about what you think? I'd be interested to hear what your opinion is. Do you think he was a psychopath? According to the press, a lot of people think.
I don't know. I don't know what I would label him, because it's such a.
Well, the public did.
The whole reasoning for doing it is right. But his motive behind it was, okay, start a new life with this girl, and and obviously he's an idiot, so he would get away with it. I mean, I don't think he's it seemed very, as much as it was premeditated, it was very, it still seemed very spur of the moment. They're not planned very well. But in terms of why he put those girls in those oil tanks and then put the mother, I can understand, like, Shanann, his wife, was obviously too big to fit into those tanks. And I don't even know if it's necessarily a thing of, like, even in death, he wouldn't let them be together. I don't think that's necessarily even it. I don't know. It's hard for me to make sense of, because he did seem to love those children so much. And it's just, again, like, somebody's in the way, so we're going to get rid of them. But to get rid of them in such an awful, cruel, I can't wrap my head around that.
Michael Stone, you remember from Investigation Discovery, from Anatomy of Evil, and then from The New Evil.
Mm-hmm.
I hope you've read. I'd appreciate it, hear if you did. But remember that Michael and I have always made a distinction between two different types of people who kill people in the way, which I have called elimination murder. I'm always saying that here in case you ever read about that kind of thing. Because if you look at category 10 and 11, remember, category 10 is for people who kill people in the way, but they're not psychopaths. So they do it expeditiously in a way that just, it just gets the person out of the way, and that's it. But the people who have more aberrant personalities, which is said about Watts, they're going to eliminate you, but they add unnecessary cruelty, because the personality starts playing out in the way it does even with serial killers, where part of the motive, you're almost enjoying it. You're punishing so that, it's like, I remember once Michael went to interview a serial killer, Tommy Lynn Sells. And Tommy Lynn Sells, prolific, horrible category 22 serial killer who killed children and women and men permanently. And, pretty bad, about as bad as it gets. And remember, Michael said to him, you could watch the interview on YouTube. Michael said to him, it was on Investigation Discovery. He said to him, I don't understand why you had to kill these kids, And he said, well, as somebody who has been abandoned, if I was going to kill these kids' parents, I didn't want them to grow up without their parents, so I'd kill the babies too. And then Michael, who had nerves, of steel, leans in close to the glass and he says, really? Well, then why'd you have to pick the kids up by the ankles and throw them into the wall to kill them? Why couldn't you just take a gun and do it? Why'd you have to? Guns are dangerous things. Right. Like, so in other words, like complete rationalization, but the reality is, because he was enjoying it. It wasn't just elimination. It was elimination with fun. Person. And that's why I think what you're really getting at is the idea of, why did it have to be so extra? Right. And remember, extra gets right to that heart of evil. Evil comes from the Germanic word ubu, which means extra. So and that's right at the heart of it, is all that stuff that's necessary pragmatically. I hate that I have to say pragmatically, but a person who's simply trying to work you out. If you just want to get rid of a person, you could do it in a way that it's going to involve, that. So I think he's more of an 11, right? That kind of category. So does that get to the heart of it? I think that's the answer. Is it's a mixture of motives, personality mixed with elimination. When it's pure elimination, you don't cruelty often. It's just, I shoot you and you're out of the way, and now I take your money, that kind of thing. No excess.
That's like
and it's funny that
what is evil, right?
I think there's more higher.
I've listened to that that episode that you guys did about what is evil, that really got me thinking about him, about this case. It's so funny you brought it up, because it was really like, as you were going through it, that's the thing that came into my mind. I listened to all your, the witness box.
Smart cookie. What are you going to do with your forensic?
So I work with juvenile offenders.
Good for you. Good for you. And remember that there is a difference between a primary psychopath and a secondary psychopath. Primary psychopath is probably, a little biologically inclined that way. A secondary psychopath can do really delinquent things, but it was their life that did it.
Right.
Pushed them into, and remember, don't give up on people like that. There are, you're going to encounter a smattering of them in your work. And, I'm not saying there, but in work generally. And just, remember that you could really make a difference in a juvenile.
I have a question, Dr. Gary.
That's why I always wanted to work with kids, and then specifically with offenders, because I always wanted to work with children, because I felt like you have the recidivism rate. You just, like, statistically, you have a better chance of reaching them and possibly changing things, So
you're doing the most important work there is, because remember that you're not just talking about potentially saving a person in terms of mental health and, overcoming a life of crime and whatever. You're dealing with something like that's closer to like soul. It's more of a moral matter. And you're talking about something that could lead to saving a person in that way. And, you want to understand what's being attributed to you when you do that work. That's a whole other bag of, chips, as they say. And I just kind of think what you're dealing with there is people that are at a crossroad where they can move in the direction of perdition or the light. That's a whole other story. So I think that you're pushing people in the direction of caring about other people and having empathy and making meaning out of their lives. People who have more secondary psychopathy can be saved from that path, like people that are in gangs and people that are heavily involved in that, that kind of. So, but that's beautiful. You keep doing what you're doing. That's a very special calling, and I can't tell you how proud I am to hear that Michael and some of the things that we've written and that he did, have inspired you. That means the world to me.
Oh yeah. No, he's where I am is because of Dr. Stone.
Oh, that's good for you, and I hope you read the New Evil and the work that we did together also.
I do. I just. Yep, I'm halfway through it. I'm getting there.
I only got another year to go.
Got to get to Michael's part. Yeah, part 2 is Michael.
Yeah. It's like the biggest book of all time.
That's a big book. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for your call.
Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, it meant a lot to me.
Absolutely.
Makes me think of Mike.
All right, lines are closed. Let's see here.
This is great, Josh. We never run out of interesting questions with these calls. No, and we never get trolls. I don't understand it. You don't even have a call screener, and we don't get any trolls.
I'm the one screening them. They don't. All I see is like the name and the number. But I got a quick. I got a quick trigger finger for this because I'm always kind of ready for it, but it doesn't happen that often. But when it does. You'll just hear this. You don't like that. I don't like that. Not a very good call. I'm the troll screener. That's right. You don't need a repeat of it. Let's see.
I love that. Are we going to answer a couple more questions that just come?
We have. Yeah. So. KK Michelle says, thank you both for your patience, kindness, empathy for the callers. It takes courage for people to be vulnerable and calling. Dr. Gary, your thoughts on Joseph Duncan at some point on the show. God bless you both.
Well, let's reserve that. That's worthy of its own show, Josh.
All right.
Are you familiar with that story at all?
No, I'm not.
Do a quick Google of it. Summarize it.
Joseph Edward Duncan.
Mm-hmm.
American convicted serial killer and
Right.
child molester who was on death row.
Mhm.
Why can I tell you I don't like him?
So, but keep reading.
Was on death row in federal prison following the 2005 kidnapping and murders of members of the grown
Mm-hmm. Keep
grown
going.
family
Read it.
and Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. He was also serving 11 consecutive sentences of life without parole for the 1997 murders of Anthony Martinez of Belmont, California. Additionally, Duncan confessed to, but has not been charged with, the 1996 murder of two girls. I don't know how to Samuel White and Carmen Cubis in Seattle, Washington. At the time of the attack, the grown family, Duncan, was on the run from a child molestation charge in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
Keep going.
Keep going.
During his incarceration, authorities connected Duncan with the unsolved murders of Anthony Martinez in California and two girls in Seattle, which all occurred when Duncan was on parole from 1994 to 1997. In all, Duncan was convicted in Idaho for kidnapping and murdering the three victims in Coeur d'Alene, for which he was given 6 life sentences in federal court for kidnapping Shasta and Dylan Groen and murdering Dylan, for which he was given 3 death sentences and 3 life sentences. And in the state of California for kidnapping and murdering Martinez, for which he was given 2 life sentences. Keep going.
Right. Well, but this is what I'm trying to get at by you reading the history.
That he's
So you know, so break down the victims. In other words, was there a cooling off period between the victims, or were they all killed in one place at the same time?
No, they were not all killed in the same place at the same time.
Well, the idea is that there was a family, right, that was basically like abducted and killed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like this Groen family, right?
Yes.
So then the idea is, after this, the FBI launched this mission to try to find all kinds of other cases, really raising the question: is this a person who basically, eliminated a whole family closer to a mass murderer? Or is he a serial killer, a sexually perverse serial killer who was going around killing people all over the place? And what makes this guy interesting is that the fact is he was basically a garden variety sexually perverse killer who was killing children, adults, or whatever. Right. But it's this thing of like connecting the dots to determine if he goes beyond one category, right? Is this a guy that just like killed an entire family and that was it? Or are there going to be loads of other cases? And I think the answer is there are probably loads of other cases. The thing is, if I remember correctly, he's dead. I'm pretty sure he's dead. I think he died in his 50s of brain tumor, something like that. I think he died of brain tumor. And he probably took to the grave a lot of other cases. But that's a really wretched kind of case. I mean, I remember one story about him where I think it was something like he helped a kid to find a missing cat, only to assault and kill the kid. There was a question of whether that's what he did, that kind of thing. So you're talking about the worst of the worst, Yeah. And but I think what's interesting about the caller's question is probably something about how is he properly categorized. Well, it's going to depend on how many cases are tied to him, if there were cooling off periods, that kind of thing. The categorization is what I think is interesting about the Duncan case. But I think there are other cases.
Yeah, well, just reading that is just
horrifying.
Crazy. Yeah. Question: do parents who lose a child ever recover? I know there are studies that our brain actually changes its wiring. I feel hopeless most of the time. Lost my 17-year-old beautiful daughter, 11/11/22. No, I can answer from not personal experience, but a kind of a one-off. I watched my grandmother, my mother, who was murdered violently, shot 4 times, twice in the face. And the answer to the question is, from what I've seen, no. But time has a way of lessening the pain. But you never fully recover, because a part of you, it's, like I've told my kids, before, when they go out and do something in the world, I say, be careful what you're doing. I don't want you to get hurt. I don't want something bad to happen to you, like every parent says. I said, because if something bad happens to you and you die or you get hurt and whatever, a part of me goes too. And, I've told that to my sister, to my nephews. I said, that they're a part of you. So I just don't think that you ever could recover. I don't want to talk about Chris's personal tragedy, but we talked about it on the air when he lost his.
Such a beautiful person, the way that he uses that to heal people. We love Chris as a person. He's like a brother to us, and he's a good example, as are you, Josh, of how you can make meaning out of this stuff to try to help people. But is that the daughter in the photo?
I don't know.
Maybe they could tell us in the chat.
Is this let me see. Is this your daughter that's in the photo with you? We'll wait for.
I don't know what happened.
It is, yes.
They said yes, and do they want to tell us what happened?
Would you like to tell us what happened? I mean, you don't have to, obviously, but
somebody wants to. Josh, could they call in?
If she'd like to
let them call in, I don't think we can have somebody cross our path with this kind of pain and not
Let me open
give
it
them
up.
an opportunity to talk about it.
If she wants to, she's more than welcome to. Here.
It's unimaginable.
I agree.
17. Remember the old poem by Whittier? Of all sad words of tongue or pen, the saddest of these it might have been.
I love that. Love that. Hold on, let me get this, bring it up really quick, and then we will absolutely.
What a warm and kind face she has in that photo, and how much she loves. How much she loves the person she's pictured with. AJ, you're right. I read too much. And I remember it. That's the scary part.
That is, I mean, that's, your comprehension is unmatched.
I don't know about the comprehension. I just remember it.
I said your comprehension's unmatched.
But that's beautiful. Is she going to call?
I think so, but let me just, I'm resetting the pin here.
Thank you for calling Call-In Studios host and call screener line.
It's like movie phone. Remember movie phone?
Enter your 6-digit.
Yeah, I do.
Thank you for calling movie phone. Plus, remember that? That used to. Remember when on Seinfeld when Kramer becomes movie phone?
Yeah, I do remember that.
Memorizes it.
It was an invalid pin for.
It was not an invalid pin.
I love Seinfeld.
It's my favorite show.
Hysterical. You name an episode, I've seen it.
Hold on, I'm trying to get it here. I'm sorry. I just He just closed it out.
Somebody is saying she doesn't have the number.
Well, there's
to call
nothing.
the number out. To give her call the number out.
Oh, wait, hold on. I think we're.
Thank you, Ola.
This should work. I mean, it should, but.
Thank you for calling Colin Studios host and call screener line. Enter your 6.
She's saying that it says user busy.
Yeah, I'm trying to open the line back up.
Welcome, host. You are now in the host room and can manage your callers from the Colin Studio web interface.
Got it.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
And yes, Tarn, I did. The answer to your question is a big yes.
Okay, so the number.
Chris, Josh, don't you love how two and a half hours in, this audience isn't going anywhere? They're like glued to you. They love listening to you.
They're fantastic.
It's great.
They're fantastic.
We're doing some good, maybe.
Okay, so Lindsay G, tell me your area code, and I will answer that call. Line's still not working. Great. Good job, Dr. Gary. Oh, wait. Go ahead now. I'm sorry.
With me. I'm teasing.
253. Okay, go ahead and call in. It'll work now. Guaranteed. Peg Bundy says that she got up at 3:30 a.m. to watch this show. Okay, here we go.
I love Peg Bundy, by the way. The character of Peg Bundy.
253.
It's great.
Okay, here we go.
Love.
All right.
Hi.
Lindsay, how are you?
Hi.
Good. I can't believe I'm on the call. I didn't expect anyone to really react to my message, but thank you guys so much. I'm going to cry right now.
Oh, is that you in the picture is that you in the photo?
Yeah, that's me and my daughter. We were on the airplane. Yeah. Yeah, that's her and I. My daughter Kendall.
Years old. But and her what would have been her 19th birthday's coming up.
Well, no, that's when she passed. I lost her on 11/11/22.
No, but I'm saying,
yeah.
I'm saying that on 11/11/24 it would have been her 19th birthday, right? Coming up. Her birthday.
No, that's the day she passed.
So that'd be here since she passed.
Oh, I see. It's not okay. So then it's going to be the anniversary, 2-year anniversary of her passing.
Yeah.
Oh, now I'm understanding.
Yeah.
More clearly. But can you tell me? You want to tell us a little bit about who she was and what happened?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was just. I mean, she was struggling a little bit, but she couldn't sleep, and she. I didn't know. I just said, it's a normal night, and said good night to her, and gave her a hug, and night, Mom, and went to her room. She wasn't really feeling well, but I guess she couldn't sleep, and so she had a Percocet that she thought somebody was like, "Oh, take this, I'll be asleep." And I found her in the morning. It was laced. So, yeah. When I went to find her in the morning, yeah, and this is at home where she's supposed to be safe, right?
Laced. Who laced it?
Laced the set. Oh, yeah. I don't know the police are not. They don't care. It's just this whole mess. She dealt with some bullying online because she was assaulted when she was younger, and then they videoed it, and that went around online during COVID, and so then she was bullied about that. I didn't even know about that. And get this, she finally came forward 2 months before she passed, and they dropped the case against the guys, and they were adults at the time and 18, and she was 15 at the time. She was so she was being bullied, and then she didn't want to tell me. They thought it was her. She thought it was her fault. She had some alcohol at a party. They make the victims feel like it's their fault. I didn't know she was struggling with. So yeah.
What is there to say?
And then we are in. What's that?
What is there to say?
And then like, yeah, and like what's horrible too is like even after she passed, like she had the courage to come forward and they like dropped the case against them. They called. They were like, "Well, the victim's deceased, ma'am," and that's how they addressed me. And so they just dropped the whole case against the guys, and they were adults, like I said, and it was on video.
So she was bullied for some time before this experience. She was before you lost her. She was bullied. And it was reported. Like the bullying. Did you say the bullying?
The video went.
Like she was cyber bullied, or
video of the assault went.
Oh,
yeah.
Dear Lord.
Because the video went viral. Yeah, during COVID. That's her assault.
So wait, so she was assaulted physically at a party?
Actually, yeah.
Because she was, and they blamed it, and it was recorded.
She was roofied.
Gotcha.
Yeah, she was roofied. So like, yeah, so she was totally passed out.
Was this case in the media? Was this a widely circulated, like this story? Was it in the newspapers?
No, because she had just come. I just had found out about it shortly before she passed.
You know,
the police, and then
oh my goodness. You know, Josh, don't you think this is a story that Chris in the interview room would find something he might want to talk about, or maybe, you know, to get to the bottom of this, or give an opportunity to. I think there's something about this story that would really be very moving to Chris as it is to us. Maybe we can give you his contact info. But don't you think, Josh, or even maybe an episode could be dedicated to it?
And I'll tell you, matter of fact, why don't you, and we'll put it in
right.
Email me, and then we can do something, you know, because I know that I can tell you that, you know, I had a friend, he worked for me for a long time, and he was a great guy. He was younger than I was, and he played video games all the time. He lived at home with his mom. He didn't have any responsibilities or anything. He was I don't know, probably 28 at the time.
Oh wow. Okay.
He had accidentally he had an accidental overdose, and I was we
have to say, like, it's fentanyl poisoning, right?
What's that?
It's fentanyl poisoning because nobody knows they're taking. It's fentanyl poisoning, in my opinion, because nobody knows they're taking fentanyl.
Well, there's another topic that I know is Chris and Josh and I have talked about previously. It's a terrible scourge, you know, the time we're living in. It's awful, and there are drugs that are coming out, hitting the market, that are even worse, if it's even imaginable. But I really think that your story and the importance of keeping your daughter alive through a sense of purpose and mission, and to tell her story and to give her dignity. I mean, the loss of dignity in these stories. This story breaks my heart. I mean, you could take one her in the photo and you see what
talk about it.
Yeah, because and I can understand why, because, you know, when you say that and people will say, oh, well, you know, accidents happen. Kids, you know, make mistakes, and they're not as careful as they should be about things. I mean, adults are the same way. And so I get your trepidation, and I really do appreciate, you know, you asking this question, because I know that your heart breaks. I understand loss. It's the worst. And every day that you wake up it's just like another nightmare, and there's nothing.
Yeah, I have to wake up and realize she's not here. Yeah, nothing. And I have to wake up every day when I hear. But if I do fall asleep, because now I have like this weird PTSD that if I go to sleep, like someone's gonna pass away.
Yeah,
because that's what happened with her. Right, she's in my own home.
Well, you know, when my mother was killed, the cops came to my.
Sorry.
Oh no, that's I'm just you know. I appreciate that, and you know, it was such a long time ago, and I've learned to cope, but you know, never get over it. But you know, one of the things that my grandmother, she got a phone call in the middle of the night, and it was to tell her about my mother, and I wasn't there, but I was at the house. But what happened was she hit the floor. You know, she passed out, and then the cops were over there. And for years, if there was a strange phone call in the middle of the night, it would enact this reaction that was, I mean, it was absolutely, it was just terrifying, you know, and you know, shaking. So I know that you're suffering, and it's just an awful thing that you have to deal with. And but I don't think anybody ever fully gets over anything. I think that because it's relatively recent as well.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And it's also that all of the things that you associate, you know, when people get affected by this kind of thing, the things that remind them of the event can be very overwhelming. And in this story, the things that are associated with it are some of the most basic and beautiful things in the world, like hugging your child or putting them in bed or sitting with them. So it takes the things that are supposed to give you joy and pleasure in life, and it makes them into something that is associated with something awful, and it robs you of that story. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I go to the grocery store, and even still, like, I'll reach for something that she would like. Let's say, perhaps, like, there's these waffles at Costco, and I still reach for them for her because, like, I think, oh, she would like these, right? And so, like, it happened a few weeks ago, and I just, like, had to run out of Costco and leave my car, which I hate to do. Like, I feel bad that I do that, but I had to.
I know.
It's hard.
But I think that the most important thing is that, look, there is not any way that anybody's going to have words for you that are going to make it possible to comprehend what happened here. It is not the normal course of events to bury one's child. It is unfathomable. I have dealt with people personally and in treatment that have had to do that. There are no words that we're going to be able to give you here. Okay? But what we can do is we can offer you a setting in which you can celebrate her, tell her story, help other people who may be experiencing cyberbullying, who may be exposed to things like fentanyl and drugs, to keep them away from that. But also, I think, you know, I want you, if it's possible, to try to find some way that you can take her memory and the loss of this, just like we said earlier, and ennoble it, turn it into something, go out and save other people. It isn't going to be possible to save her, but you've got to save some other parent from ever having to experience this. And that you know, look, it's like when I see the parents that lost their kids in Sandy Hook go on television and talk about, you know, about how we can prevent something like that again. People make fun of them. They go through hell. They torture those poor people, and all they're trying to do is make meaning out of the tragedy that they experience. I don't understand what is wrong with people. And that cyberbullying you talk about, so ugly. But you clearly, I mean, if your daughter was anything like you, I mean, she must have been a luminous person. Well, you're a kind soul. That if she was a chip off the old block, I'm sure she was a lovely person. But you know how the world is. If you're good, people don't understand you and they make fun of you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, comes with the you show me somebody bullied and I'll show you somebody good. Right. That's what it is. I think bullied people are people that you know, their goodness is the world doesn't understand it.
Are you a part of a therapy group of or anything like that?
I've tried it. I have a psychiatrist. I have no, and in fact, that's another thing too. I felt like there's like there's not very many groups there's out there for like, well, only where I can have this bereaved parents, right? And like in my area, like is like I guess just outside of Seattle, there's one group that's Compassionate Friends, and like that meets once a month, and that's like about an hour from where I live, and that's just once a month So that's the only group I really have. And I thought about starting something, but and like my ability to like think and function and do things like I used to be able to do. I mean, I'm a CPA. Like I've always been driven, and I've been a single mom forever. And but my ability now to just like even function, like I go to like just do anything is compromised.
Well,
so I can't think about organizing
part of your heart, a huge part of your life. I mean, you know that.
Yeah.
You know, I'll tell you this. I remember when my grandfather, who raised me because my father wasn't there, and he died. You know, I believe it was 2010, and I was relatively young still. I was, you know, mid-20s, and I remember after his funeral, my uncle, who was his son, he says, they were all in town. He said, "Come on, let's go bowling." And I said, "I'm not going bowling." He says, "Why not?" And I said, "Because I don't feel like it. I'm upset. You know, I'm not having a good day." Yeah. And he says, life goes on, and you're going to be sad tomorrow, no matter what. Come with us.
That's true.
And
my gosh.
I went,
right.
Okay. And he says, life will never be the same, but you'll adjust eventually and you'll find your way. And I know that there are things like you just said, I just heard what you just said. You said you had thought about starting something like a support group or anything, you know, something like that. The terrible part about it is life absolutely goes on. It doesn't matter who it is that passes away. It could be me, it could be, you know, my grandma, it could be Dr. Gary. Life goes on tomorrow. The trains are going to run, the subways are going to run, work is going to happen, and it'll go on with or without you.
Stop.
What's that?
Right. Yeah, I agree. Like you think it's going to stop, but it doesn't.
It doesn't.
You think like a tragedy like this happens, you think the world will stop, but it doesn't.
It doesn't stop.
And you have to keep. And that's the hard thing. It's like, how do I exist in this world? How are our parents? How can you even expect a parent to like participate in the world like they did before after losing a child? Because there is that expectation, right, that you still can go to work and function and do things like in here. I can't, and I've had a hard time, and that's the next thing that people is hard.
We have a father in
I
the
just
chat
tell you really quick though.
Who's missing his son,
right?
And his name's Seth Rogers. I don't know if you're familiar with the case of Sebastian Rogers. He's been missing for quite some time, and he's in the chat right now.
I can't even imagine. That to me sounds worse because then you can't. And I'm so sorry, my heart goes out.
Yeah, that's what I'm. And you know, life. You know, every day he's got to wake up, and you know he's got to do what he has to do, and it's just not easy. It's just a struggle. It takes every bit of ounce, every ounce of strength in you. Go ahead, Dr. Gary.
There are two little things that I want to share with you. I have them here on my computer. I love them so much, and they're not long, so don't worry. You're not going to be, you know, put to sleep by something here. We're each other's species, right? That's what
that's what we're here.
So these are two little poems that are by women about the experience of losing a child. And the first one I think is useful because it shows somebody who really understands the pain. And the second gets into the meaning making. And I'll read them to you because I think they're beautiful. So the first one, which is by a poet called Kim, of course. First one which is by a poet called Kim Knapp, is called Empty. And I find it very powerful. And it says, "Do not tell me I am strong. You only see my days filled with details and work. You've never shared my nights, long evenings empty. Except for memories and tears, my despair is sacrificed to responsibility. You would be strong too, because you have no other choice."
That's right.
And that's a very powerful poem. I think a person could teach a class on that poem. So beautiful. I love it. And the second one, which is called The Cord, is by Amy Merrick. I love this poem. And it says, "We are connected, my child and I, by an invisible cord not seen by the eye. It's not like the cord that connects us till birth. This cord can't be seen by any on earth. The cord does its work right from the start and binds us together attached to my heart. I know that it's there, though no one can see the invisible cord from my child to me. The strength of this cord is hard to describe. It can't be destroyed and it can't be denied. It's stronger than any cord man could create. It withstands the test and can hold any weight. And though you're gone, though you're not here with me, the cord is still there, but no one can see. It pulls at my heart, and I'm bruised and I'm sore, but the cord is my lifeline as never before. And I'm thankful that God connects us this way, a mother and a child. Death can't take away." Now you see, that's very beautiful. I love that, and I think that those poems they're so beautiful. I always wondered if the authors of those poems were women that had lost children. I'm not sure, but they certainly sound like they. I just think they're worth reading over and over again. So the first I think offers a wonderful empathy, and that's called "Empty" by Kim Knapp. And the second one, "The Cord" by Amy Merrick, reminds you of how you cannot sever the keen bond that exists between parent and child ever. That cannot die.
Ever.
Yeah, and I really want you to read that and reflect on it, because the fact is, I don't know what your particular beliefs are or anything, but I really do believe that death is more like a transition than it is an ending. And that's something that thank God you do, because if you believe that, I mean, what if you don't mind my asking, what is your particular faith? Well, then that if it isn't true that there's no more death, then all those things we celebrate, Christmas and Easter and all those pretty pictures that are on holy cards and holiday cards and all that are just a bunch of stories if we don't believe that death is over. If you really understand what the essence of that faith, it's death has died.
Lindsay, I hurt with the things that have happened in my life, and very often I shed tears about my mother not being here, and it's been years. I mean, it's been, I was a little kid when it happened, but here's what I just attribute it to. And for some reason, when I do cry, I have a different attitude about it now than I did when I was younger. And my attitude is, when I cry for my mother, it's because she was a real person and she lives on in me, in my heart. And that the crying is my reminder that she is very real and was very real and will always be a part of my life. Even though we're not making more memories or anything like that, we have the memories.
Yeah.
I remember her voice. I remember a lot of things, and I cherish those. And the crying is nothing more than me remembering her and hurting for her.
And loving her. Yeah. And having that love.
And that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right.
And it's okay.
Like I always think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No,
I just like, sorry, going back to something you were saying earlier, is like, I always used to say you're only as happy as your saddest child. And I think that's really, it's so like, I used to say all the time, and when your child is gone, like it really, that's so much more profound, right? Because your child's gone.
Do you have other children?
I have a son. Yeah. He's now he's like 22. He's in flight school. That's another thing too. Is I think part of my issue is being alone.
Yeah, absolutely.
like it's in my world, and then like every day, my everyday world, right? And then suddenly she's gone. Like it was just like when for every day, it's like every day, like your everyday routine is like revolving around. You know, her name's Kendall, by the way, Kendall. And like it's kind of like, what time is she at school? Like pick her up to drop her off, and like what does she have to, after school today? What's she doing? You know, and so like getting her there and like everything, and like we were so close, like beyond, like people would say it was like we had the same soul, like people would say that, and we were just connected like that. And so when she's gone, it's just like how do I, like my own daily routine is off. I don't even know how to function because every day is on my kid, and then my son left for flight school.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I want to make sure we say to you is this: I really believe that if your daughter is watching you, and I have no doubt she is, what she would say to you is, I want to be at peace, and I can't be because I love you, and I'm suffering because you're upset. And I think that
I feel like that's true. Thank you. I know
it's okay to see what I think is that because she had such a hard teenage life, it feels especially awful. It feels like she didn't even get a happy teenagerhood. This horrible thing happened to her, and then this. And I think the point is she's trying to say to you, where I am now, I'm at peace. Now I'm in a place where there's nothing but love and people who see me for what I really am. And I can't be in this light and be at peace if you're suffering because I love you. And I think the point is that you have to, for her. That's how you have to think about it.
I'm taking that in. Sorry, I'm taking that in. Yeah, I love that. Can you say that again? Like, it's like I need to record this already.
I think the point is that wherever she is, she's trying to tell you that she's in a kind of a light and in a place where there's nothing but love, and to be at peace in that. She can't relax if her mom is still miserable about her. I think she needs you to be at peace so that she can. You have to live for her. Give her the permission to rest.
Yeah, I do feel that. Like there's this kind of guilt that I have of like I'm just upset, not able to function. That's preventing her from moving on and enjoying what she deserves to have in the afterlife or the next journey.
Well, I think it's perfectly valid. Nobody can tell you what to feel, but it's perfect. You loved her. You love her now. But the point is, try to strive to experience a kind of allowing her to kind of be at peace.
Yeah, and it's right. Yeah, I like that kind of goal. Thank you.
She loves you just as much as you love her. And remember that she's waiting for you there.
Yeah.
Remember that. One day when you're an older woman, right? One day when you're an older woman and you're on your hospital bed and there's all tubes around you and the doctors are rushing around, don't be scared of that transition. Remember that you just close your eyes and you say,
"Oh no,
Kendall."
Yeah. That's when.
Yeah.
Oh, that's one thing I was like, since we passed that, to say is I'm not afraid to die at all. Like the thought, like like when
it occurs naturally when it's time. Not you don't look forward to it like it's
when it's time, right? Oh no. But like what if they were to happen, I'm not afraid of that transition anymore. Like others like would have, right? Like I think that I was immediately gone.
Yeah, and I'm so proud of you for calling and sharing something so nakedly with the whole audience here. I mean, because let me be honest with you, there have got to be people in this audience who know exactly what you're dealing with. I mean, if we ask for a show of hands of people that are dealing with loss, believe me, you're touching a lot of people, and I hope you'll use it to help other people who are.
That's what I was gonna say. Is I feel like this phone call is you are looking for a purpose again. Your purpose was your daughter. And here's the thing, children grow up and they move off or they get married, they go away, and then you end up looking for a purpose. That's not easy either, but you can pick up and call them on the phone and all that kind of stuff. But it sounds like
it's a transition, right?
You have work to do. You have work to do.
Thanks.
It's
Yeah,
not over.
and I will, and then thank you. Like I almost feel like this is inspirational. But I have to say one thing really quick.
Of course.
Because when you mentioned bowling, for her celebration of life, and always like she never wanted. She was like this, like never always worried about the people. Like didn't want anyone else to be sad or anything. So her celebration of life, like we had the viewing, and that was it was like awful. But like that was another issue. But the celebration of life, we rented out this place, living in Carver, Washington. Like we went out this restaurant that actually on the bottom floor has a bowling alley, and they were closed on Monday. So like we're not the whole facility. And we had the beautiful celebration of life, and we tried to keep it more upbeat. We had like all the apps because she's an appetizer girl, like I am. All the good appetizers. But then, and we like it was a little bit sad, but it was more positive. And then afterwards, we had bowling. So when you mentioned bowling earlier,
yeah,
it was like, oh my god, like what a connection, right? Like so afterwards, like after something like we had this bowling because we wanted people to like be happy because it enjoy Kendall's memory and know that she was so happy and move on. So when you mentioned bowling, like what a weird like connection, right?
I couldn't believe that they wanted to do that, and everybody was for it except me.
Yeah,
and because I was just hanging my head, and they said, first of all, how many more times are we all going to get together like this? Unfortunately for the circumstances, and second of all, you can cry tomorrow, Josh. That's what they told me.
Oh,
yeah,
like,
but that's not what your mom was like, right? And like I knew that's why we did it, is because we knew like my mom and I was and like that's not what Kendall would want. She would want everyone to be sad. So like with after we did like this again, it was try to keep it upbeat. We even had because she loved anything like that sugar in it, so we had donuts and candy with a sugar table on top of it. Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
And by the way,
it was
you got to give yourself time to heal as well, though. It doesn't happen overnight.
Thank you. Yeah.
And if you do come on, let's say, Josh, if you do a show or something, and she comes on and talks about this, there'll be this marvelous kind of undoing of the way that terrible video of your daughter went viral. You can make a video go viral that's a message of hope and that gives her dignity and that helps somebody out there see the effects of the terrible act of cyberbullying or whatever this awful thing is that they did.
Right. And so, I'm always afraid. I'm afraid about talking to you about it because I don't want her to be like, because I feel like even though the DA and the prosecutor, they were like, almost like, well, like looking at her like, well, it's almost like her fault. And now she's died from like fentanyl. Like it's kind of this stigma, which just like, that's not who she was. That was a person, right? And so I'm like afraid like that she's going to be tagged to those things and not like have her life celebrated. So like, it's like even calling today, like I was kind of afraid of like telling everyone what was fentanyl because like then there's this stigma attached, and like I feel like there's like this victim like if they don't know, and these kids are dying because they're young and they don't have the tolerance to fentanyl, right? So they take it once and it's gone because they're 17 and 100 pounds, right? And
make a show or you talk about this publicly. If one person hears it and puts down the drugs or dedicates him or herself to going there and helping someone with that problem, you will change the course of a life. And that's the whole thing. You have to remember, life is not cheap. Grace is not cheap. The world wants you to think that those things are. And the reality is that the value of a life cannot be fathomed. And if you go out there and you save even one person, some family from ever having to experience this, a person from getting caught up in the darkness, you will have done something extraordinary that will ripple throughout heaven, and it'll be waiting for you on the other side. You should
like my whole life.
You're a good person, and I think that your daughter loved you very much.
Lindsay, I don't know if you, I don't know if you can, I don't know if you can see the screen or not.
Oh no, I can. No, I think. Oh, I can see the screen. Yeah, actually, it's on my TV. I was just looking the other way.
The lady on the screen.
So to see your
The lady on the screen is my mother.
Oh,
and this is right after she gave birth to me. She's because I was a fat baby. and she had to go through a C-section. She had to go through a C-section because the umbilical cord had wrapped around my neck, and I was, not doing so hot. And so she had to go through this surgery. And I found this photo just the other day, and I looked at it and I said, I sent it to my sister. And the first thing that I said was, I said, my nose is exactly like hers. And I said, and this is what I thought, right? I said this, I go, I have the same exact nose. And then I said, our lips are the same. I sent it to my sister, and the first thing she said was, you have the same exact nose as her and the same exact lips as her. And, because you showed us, your daughter and a picture of her and told us your story. And I feel compelled, to share with you. I don't have many of these photos. My mother is absolutely gorgeous. Even
before the iPhone, like that, right? Yeah. Yeah. I don't know who did that picture. She was probably mad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Picture, like, who took that picture?
1985.
Who do you think took the picture, Josh? Whenever I look at photos, I always think,
I believe it was her sister. My aunt Maureen.
I don't have it.
She must have loved her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just love this photo.
I do feel like there's something like just like sound like I know if like you would have been brought in the room, she would have lit up and woken up, right?
Yeah. Oh.
If you were there, if you would have brought you in the room, she would have woken up and like been there.
I used to get mad because every time I get dirty, I had to change my clothes. She made me change my clothes. If I had anything on my face, she'd wipe my face, and I would just get so annoyed. And all she was doing was nurturing. She was just nurturing me.
Yeah. Well, you're all boy, right? Yeah. Right. But different, like my son. Yeah, different girls, right? Yeah, my son, like I felt like he was the first grandson on both sides, and it was like I felt like he never touched the ground, like for the first years. Never even did he even touch the ground? I don't even know. And then Kendall was his first granddaughter, So yeah, but I love. Yeah, what a sweet mom. Like I know, I know she's watching you and so proud of you. Like the changes you're making.
Well, yeah, and I want to tell you though, I don't know if you know the email to the show.
No, I don't. Make sure
get a pen or something.
Yeah,
and I'll.
I do have it ready. Yeah.
Okay, so it's lab.
I wrote down because I was writing down the names of the poets. Yeah.
Oh, very good. Lab rat army at gmail.com. That'll come directly to me. And we'll stay in touch, and we can set you.
Thank you so much, you guys, and bless you. And bless your chat. I watch. Of course, I can't watch the chat or anything because that would just
they're just sending you love. They're sending you love.
Yeah. And thank you. I already I could feel it, even though I wasn't seeing it. Like I just feel like okay, like no one. I just felt like your chat wasn't going to be like vilify me. Like, and it was a safe place for me to call.
Not at all.
I hope did it do you some good? Did it do you some good? Do you feel like you got something out of calling?
I feel like I felt kind of inspired, almost like energized, and I didn't expect that. I just kind of like was like expecting to be told like, no, you're never going to get over it. Your brain has been like literally rewired. Like you are not gonna be the person you were before. You're right, and it's just like it's kind of over for you. Like just pat me on the head, like just go out. Like okay,
humans are
I feel
resilient.
Like it's a new purpose.
Humans are resilient.
Yeah, right.
And you're going to find your purpose.
Have a purpose. Yeah. Right? I need that, right? And I know, like, letting Kendall knowing I'm okay, let her rest and like, let her enjoy the next phase of her life.
That's right. And it gives you permission. It gives you permission to be happy and live a life because you're doing it for her. It's not selfish.
Not at all.
You're doing it for her.
Right?
Being happy is what she wants.
Thank you. And that's maybe what I needed to hear. Yeah, that's maybe what
And when you watch this back, when you watch this back, you go read these messages that are in the chat. There's not a bad one amongst them.
Really, thank you guys so much. You've done so much for me. You don't even know.
Well, thank you. And
Alrighty, so thank
I'm
you.
looking for your email. Okay.
Okay.
All right,
Sounds good.
Lindsay.
You guys have a wonderful night. Thank you,
You too.
Pat. Love you guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
That was beautiful.
It always turns into something special. I tell you that. We're here for a reason, I guess.
That's right.
No, I appreciate it, Dr. Gary. I know you got to work in the morning and it's late where you're at. Thank you so much for being here. Your time is invaluable, and you know we're trying to streamline it. We're getting better, and we'll continue to get better at it because. But I really do like listening and hearing what people have to say, and we're just trying to help out whenever we can.
The fact is that time is the most generous thing you can give anybody. And give it away like water. Nothing wrong.
Sunshine Susie, we sure will. We'll do our absolute best.
Right. Rest. Give your time away till you're exhausted. Rest away.
Thank you as well. And I thank everybody that's here. And you guys have a fantastic evening. We'll see you on the next one.